Chair, meeting is now being recorded.
I would like to call the regular meeting of November 8th, 2021 to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the secretary please call the roll?
Commissioner Calderon,
Present.
Commissioner McLaughlin,
Here.
Commissioner Wu,
Pleasure being present.
Vice Chair Pham.
Here.
Chair Morrissey.
Here.
For the record, Commissioner Alrighty and Ramos will be joining us by Zoom, with Commissioner Already joining us around 6 o'clock.
Hi, this is Commissioner Ramos. I'm also present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we begin, I'd like to remind my colleagues to turn your microphones on when speaking and off when not speaking. And when speaking, please place your microphone about 4 inches from me. Members of the public may attend planning commission meetings in person or virtually via Zoom. And now invite the commission secretary to describe the way the public can access and participate in this meeting.
This meeting is being live streamed via our portal, www.santana.primegov.com/public-portal, and to YouTube, www.youtube.com/City of Santa Ana videos. If you would like to provide a public comment, you may do so in the following ways. Join the meeting via Zoom, entering meeting ID 8126104991. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, select the hand icon to let us know you would like to speak. You will be called on by the name you entered. If you are calling us, please dial 669-900-9128. Enter meeting ID 8126104991. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, press the 9 button, *9, to let us know you would like to speak. You will be called upon by the last 3 digits of your phone number. After you are called upon, you must press *6 to unmute yourself. For those who are attending this meeting in person and would like to provide a public comment, please fill out a request to speak form and turn it into the secretary. All speakers will have 3 minutes to speak. I will alert you when your time is up.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving on to public comments on non-agenda items. Secretary, does anyone wish to speak on non-agenda items?
If you are attending this meeting in person and would like to comment on this item, please fill out a request form located on the table up front. If you are participating via Zoom and would like to comment on this item, please select the hand icon and unmute yourself. If you are calling in and would like to comment on these items, please dial *9, press *6 to unmute yourself. I will wait a few seconds. We have no comments.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent calendar items. Is there a motion to approve item A, minutes from October 11th, 2021, and item B, excused absences? I move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Wu and seconded by Commissioner Calderon. For the consent calendar. Secretary, please call for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Already, Commissioner Calderon,
Aye.
Commissioner McLaughlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos,
Aye.
Commissioner Wu,
Aye.
Vice Chair Pham,
Aye.
Chair Morrissey.
Aye.
Motion is approved by majority vote with Commissioner Alderani absent.
Thank you, and we will move on to the business calendar. I will go through the public hearing protocols, but before I do that, I'd like to move the last item number 4. Under administrative matters, move that to the beginning of the agenda. So I'll go through the public hearing protocols. I will now review the process for public hearings so that everyone knows what to expect. Staff will provide a presentation and answer questions from the commission. The public hearing will be open. The applicant will be given the opportunity to speak, limited to 15 minutes. Members of the public will be given the opportunity to comment, limited to 3 minutes. The applicant will be given the opportunity to respond to comments made by the public, limited to 5 minutes. The public hearing will be closed. Discussion will return to the commission with formal action taken to approve, conditionally approve, deny, or continue review of the application. Please consider the following suggestions when organizing your comments. Please state your name and address. Strictly voluntary on the address. State whether you support, oppose, or are neutral to the proposal. Your statement should include all pertinent facts within your knowledge. Avoid gossip, emotion, and repetition. A clear, concise, and non-repetitive argument is most effective. We will now move to the item for planning commission review of architectural updates to street facing elevations at the Westview Housing Residential Community located at 2530 and 2534 Westminster Avenue. Before we begin, do any commissioners have anything they wish to disclose with regards to the site? Start with Commissioner Calderon.
Nothing to disclose.
Commissioner Wu,
Nothing to disclose.
Commissioner Pham, and I don't have anything to disclose either. Have we received any written communication?
This is Commissioner Ramos. I also have nothing to disclose.
Nothing to disclose, thank you.
No written communication.
We will now take comments from the public. Secretary, do we have any members of the public who would like to comment?
If you are attending this meeting in person and would like to comment on this item, please fill out a request form to speak. If you are participating via Zoom and would like to comment on this item, please select the hand icon and unmute yourself. If you are calling in and would like to comment on this item, please dial *9 and press *6 to unmute yourself. I will leave 2 seconds. We have no comments.
Okay. I would like to invite staff Ali district board to provide a brief presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Item 4, which we're considering first, is a receive and file for the property at 2538, 2534 Westminster Avenue. This is a receive and file to acknowledge updates to architectural elevations facing Westminster Avenue for the Westview Housing Residential Community. Just for some background, the Planning Commission recommended that the City Council approve the entitlements for this community in December 14, 2020, about a year ago. The City Council subsequently went on to approve those entitlements in January of 2021. And just for some background and context, the project consists of a community of 3 and 4 story residential buildings with 85 affordable units containing 1 to 4 bedrooms, 58 for low income families, 26 for permanent supportive housing, and 1 as a manager unit. As part of the entitlements that were approved with the Planning Commission's recommendation, the developer is obligated to return to the Planning Commission to review the updates to Westminster Avenue elevations, which is what we're here doing tonight. So the location has a general plan designation of urban neighborhood and it's zone specific development number 97 for this community. It's vacant and surrounded by commercial and residential uses. So the proposed changes are described in detail in the staff report that was included with the packet, but they do include some changes primarily along Westminster Avenue and some components along Karen to the west. And I'll go ahead and show those now on the screen for the commission's benefit. So the before elevations are up top, and these show basically what the Planning Commission was presented with in December of 2020. And following the feedback from the commission at that time, the architect for the project as well as the developer began engaging with staff in September of this year over proposed changes to the elevations to accentuate certain features of the building facing Westminster Avenue. Those include primarily highlighting the pop outs on the ground floor along Westminster Avenue and adding some extra architectural details at the corner of the project to the right, including nice framing along the ground floor lobby with the pop out and differentiating colors as well as wood metal screens. And these elements are also carried over around the corner to ensure architectural consistency, with some minor changes also proposed on the interior elevations to complement the overall theme of the project. And so these are some extra elevations as well, showing as you wrap around the corner toward the west. Again, the bottom elevation or the bottom view is the after the proposed elevation, again, showing the details of the colors and the pop out and some railings and balconies added. So again, extra details are provided in the staff report packet for the project. And again, there are no changes to the overall scope of the project. These were just done to bring back to the commission as a receive and file. And staff has also reviewed these and finds them to be consistent with the overall entitlements and the intent of the commission back in December of 2020. There's no CEQA or fiscal impact associated with the project, and that staff recommends a receive and file for this item. Be happy to answer questions. The developer's representative and architect are also here this evening to answer any questions the commission might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Bring it back to the commission. Do any commissioners have questions for staff?
I know.
Commissioner Randall?
I just have a question. How many units are in total?
There are 85 affordable units on the project.
And then how many parking spots?
That I don't recall off the top of my head. I don't believe there's any changes to that. But the architect is here available to answer any questions. I can always look that up for you as well.
Right. Thank you.
Commissioner McCollum, do you have any questions for staff?
On one of the changes I thought of this correct property was that there was some road work that worked as far as entry and exit. Where do we see that?
That's not a part of the scope of the discussion tonight. These are simply to review the architectural changes that were requested by the planning commission. But those would be a part of the overall plan check sets that are submitted with the street improvement plans if the project were to move forward.
Yeah, I mean, that was a key point when we had the discussion first.
Correct, and there haven't been any changes to that in terms of what the planning commission had requested at the time. It was subsequently agreed to by the public works agency. They're just not a part of this EV scope.
Okay. That's fine.
Thank you. I have no questions.
I'd like to move that we approve the receipt of file.
Okay. Motion from,
Do we need to hear it first? I'm sorry.
no, I opened for public comment. There was no public comment.
If I could just ask that the commissioners state their name and their motion in seconding for the record, that would be helpful.
Commissioner Wu, and move that the receipt of file.
Commissioner Clement, second.
If it was,
Technically, it's not a public hearing item, it's just a secret file.
Madam Secretary, may I roll call vote?
Commissioner Alderdi. Commissioner Calderon.
Aye.
Commissioner McLaughlin.
aye.
Commissioner Ramos. Check on that one. Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
Commissioner Pham.
Aye.
Chair Morrissey.
Aye.
Motion passes with Commissioner Alderdi and Commissioner Ramos.
Sorry, I was having audio issues. This is Commissioner Ramos, and I vote aye as well.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Ramos. We did hear you.
You're
Okay, we will move to the first item of the business calendar. This is the time and place for the public hearing on item number 1, conditional use permit number 2021-11, property located at 2401 South Walnut Street. Please note, decision on this matter is final, appealed within 10 days by any interested individual or party. Before we begin, do any commissioners have anything they wish to disclose with regards to this item? Mr. Wu,
None.
Mr. Fan, Mr. Ramos,
And no disclosures. Thank you.
Commissioner Calderon,
Nothing to disclose.
Commissioner McLaughlin,
Nothing to disclose.
and I have nothing. And now we will invite staff, Mr. Orozco, to provide a brief presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item tonight, there'll be two that are very similar, both require this renewal. The first item is actually for the property 2401 South Fulton Street, conditional permit number 2021-11. As I mentioned, this is a renewal of an existing facility. It's a 60-foot high major wireless facility that's disguised as monopole. Staff has reviewed the application and recommended to adopt a resolution approving conditional use permit number 2021-11 as condition. General information about the property is located in the light industrial zone, south of the 55 freeway, on the same parcel as the Las Motorsports. The location of the facility is actually towards the back corner. There is an enclosure that is tucked away at the southeast corner, and then the modern palm is just adjacent to the two existing Mexican palms just behind the building. This is a site visit photo of the facility. As you can see, the screening is disguised as a palm. As part of the improvements, the applicant has indicated that some of the fronds will be replaced to provide better screening of the tenants. And the original CUP was actually back in 2000. You know, the code requires a 10-year renewal for all major wireless facilities. And so it did receive a renewal 10 years after the original date, and we're back again for another 10-year renewal. The site is industrial, as part of the industrial uses out there. As section 41-198 requires, obviously, the renewal every 10 years, and that is why we were here. tonight. This is a quick site plan view of the location in reference to the existing building and site. And the analysis after staff's review is that it will continue to provide the benefits to residents, employees, visitors in the area. The location of the wireless facility is actually optimal because it is screened behind the building and it does provide a stealth view of a palm, which is a requirement of the code. The facility is going to continue the same sort of use and design, and it will not adversely affect the general plan as they are compatible with the surrounding environments and the objectives and goals of the land use element. Conditions of approval, as well as the existing conditions of approval for the wireless facility, are in place and will address the potential negative impacts. The CEQA here is an existing facility, so staff will file this for the project, and there are no physical impacts associated with the project as well. As mentioned, staff recommends resolution approval of resolution for conditional use permit number 2021-11 as condition. I am available to answer any additional questions, and I believe the applicant is also virtually in attendance.
Thank you for the presentation. Does the commission have any questions of staff? Commissioner Wu?
No.
Commissioner Fan? Commissioner Calderon?
No questions.
Commissioner McLaughlin?
No questions.
And I have no questions. And Secretary, we received.
This is Commissioner Ramos. I have no questions for staff at this time.
Madam Chair, we received a written communication.
We have no written communications.
I hope we adopt resolution including condition use for the 2021.
I need to open the public hearing.
Oh, sorry.
So I now open the public hearing and we'll take comments from the public. Secretary, do we have any members of the public that would like to comment?
If you are attending this meeting in person and would like to comment on this item, please fill out a request to speak form and turn it in to me. If you are participating via Zoom and would like to comment on this item, please select the hand icon and unmute yourself. If you are calling in and would like to comment on this item, please dial *9 and press *6 to unmute yourself. I will wait a few seconds. We have no comments.
Did the applicant wish to speak?
Alec Adams on behalf of T-Mobile. I'd just like to thank Ivan for the excellent staff presentation and briefly reiterate, this is a routine renewal. The facility has been there for close to 20 years. I think it's in a great location, and the applicant has agreed to re-spruce the stealthing on the monopine as well as improve the landscaping. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. The public hearing is now closed. And I will entertain a motion to approve this minutes.
Adopt the resolution, conditional use permit 2021-11.
Is there a second?
This is Commissioner Calderon. I'll second it.
Motion by Commissioner Wu, seconded by Commissioner Calderon. Secretary, please call for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Alderete. Commissioner Calderon.
Aye. Aye.
Commissioner McLaughlin.
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos.
Aye.
Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
Vice Chair Pham.
Aye.
Chair Morrissey.
Aye.
Motion passes with majority vote with Commissioner Alderon absent.
Thank you for your time.
Say that again, Commissioner Aldereti.
That was the applicant.
Oh, okay, thank you.
For your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2 on the business calendar. This is the time and place for the public hearing on item number 2, conditional use permit number 2021-17 for the property located at 601 South Santa Fe Street. Please note, the decision on this matter is final unless appealed within 10 days by any interested party or individual. Before we begin, do any commissioners have anything they wish to disclose with regards to this item? Mr. Wu.
None whatsoever.
Commissioner Ramos.
No disclosures. Thank you.
Commissioner Pham.
Nothing to disclose.
Commissioner Calderon.
Nothing to disclose.
Commissioner McLaughlin.
Nothing to disclose.
And I have no disclosures. And now, Mr. Orozco will now provide a brief presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned, this is our second application for a renewal of an existing wireless facility. This location is actually at 601 South Santa Fe Street, conditional use permit number 2021-17. As mentioned with the previous application, staff has reviewed the application to renew the facility and has recommended the approval through a resolution as conditioned. The location here is also industrial, but it is our M2 heavy industrial zone, and it is part of our general plan industrial land use designation. You have pretty much industrial throughout with a railroad to the north. This is a site photo that was taken recently of the facility, and I will show exactly where the additional trees are located and the enclosure in just 1 second. A little background about this location. It was actually approved 10 years ago originally, and so we're here again for the 10-year renewal. It was permitted as a monopine with the ancillary equipment just located to the northwest. And as I mentioned before, this section 1983 requires a renewal for major wireless facilities every 10 years. The site plan here shows the location of the facility in yellow and red. The 2 green images there are the required trees, and those are also still in existence and are being maintained. And then the rectangle to the west is the enclosure where all the equipment is located, which will remain. Similar to the previous one, it will benefit the residents and visitors in the area, employees. It will continue to do what it has been doing for the last 10 years. The stelding of the wireless facility is actually in pretty good, decent shape. The facility is not adversely affecting the general plan. It is in line with the adjacent industrial uses, and the conditions of approval from the original entitlement and tonight's will make sure that it will address any potential negative impacts. As I mentioned with the previous one, there will be a CEQA filing as an existing facility, and there are no fiscal impacts associated with this project. With that, staff recommends the adoption of a resolution approving conditional use permit number 2021-17 as conditioned. I'm available to answer any additional questions, and I believe our applicant is also attending virtually.
Thank you. I'll bring it back to commissions. Does any members of the commission have questions? Start with Commissioner Calderon.
I have no questions.
Commissioner McLaughlin.
No questions.
Commissioner Wu.
No questions.
Commissioner Ramos.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Commissioner Pham.
No questions.
And I don't have any questions. Madam Secretary, have we received any written communication?
No written communications for this item.
Thank you, and I will now open the public hearing, and we'll take comments from the public. Secretary, do we have any members of the public that would like to comment?
If you are attending this meeting in person and would like to comment on this item, please fill out a request form to speak. If you are participating via Zoom and would like to comment on this item, please select the hand icon and unmute yourself. If you are calling in and would like to comment on this item, please dial *9 and press *6 to unmute yourself. I will wait a few seconds. We have no comments.
Thank you. I would ask if the applicant has any remarks you would like to make.
Hi, I don't have any further comments. Thank you, Ivan, for your presentation.
Thank you. And I will close the public hearing. I would like to call for a motion to approve this matter. Any commissioners?
I'll make a
Like to
motion
make
to
a motion?
approve this
Commissioner
item,
Wu, second.
conditional use of CUP 2021-17.
Motion made by Commissioner McLaughlin, seconded by Commissioner Wu. Madam Secretary, can you take a roll call vote?
Commissioner Aldereti, Commissioner Calderon,
Aye.
Commissioner McLaughlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos,
Aye.
Commissioner Wu,
Aye.
Vice Chair Pham,
Aye.
Chair Morrissey.
Aye.
I'm going to call Commissioner Aldereti again because he just joined in on Zoom. Commissioner Aldereti. He just connected. We will. Okay. 1 second, please. Commissioner Aldereti, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Were you able to participate in the item? Are you able to vote?
No, not for item 2.
Okay. So item passes with majority vote with Commissioner Aldereti absent.
Thank you. We'll now move to item 3, the business calendar. This is the time and place for public hearing on item number 3, final recirculated program environmental impact report number 2020-03 and general plan amendment number 2020-06. Please note, recommendation on this item will be forwarded to City Council at a later date for final determination. Before we begin, do any commissioners have anything they wish to disclose with regards to this item? I'll start with Commissioner Calderon.
Nothing to disclose.
Commissioner Aldereti. Commissioner McLaughlin.
Nothing to disclose.
Commissioner Wu.
Nothing disclosed.
Commissioner Ramos.
Yes, I participated in a community forum held by community organizations on the general plan the last week.
Thank you. Commissioner Pham.
Nothing to disclose.
And I have nothing to disclose.
Just, Mr. Chairman, I filled out an ex-parte disclosure form, and that form indicated that I met with Rise Up Willowick and other community groups on the 19th of October and again on November 3rd.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Aldereti, did you repeat that? We didn't.
Sure. I met with folks from Rise Up Willowick on October 19th and again on November 3rd, along with folks from the Kennedy Commission, OCEJ. There were a couple of other groups, but I do have an ex-parte form that I filled out that I submitted to Sarah also.
Need to clarify what year. Or needs to clarify if it was this year or last year when he met with them. So when it comes to 2021.
Can you clarify if those meetings occurred this year or last year?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's 2021, yes.
Thank you.
Participation in a community meeting does not becomes a conflict of interest unless you commit to carrying their recommendations, right? Or something like that. If you just sit there listening as a community member.
Chair, I can respond to that. I was invited as a commissioner.
Turner.
Without any further facts, there does not appear to be a conflict, no.
Commissioner Ramos, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to state that the reason for my disclosure was that I participated as a commissioner and not as a private citizen. And I was invited to listen.
Okay, thank you. So we'll now move on to presentation by staff, Ms. Melanie McCann.
Thank you, Chair Morrissey. Good evening, Chair and member of the Planning Commission. Tonight represent the culmination of well over 6 years and thousands of hours of participation and hard work from our community, stakeholders, and appointed official and elected officials like yourselves. Before I begin tonight's presentation, I'd like to take a moment to recognize and acknowledge our staff and our consultant team for their contribution to this process. They have spent countless hours of time, both inside and outside of the workday, to get to the project to where it is today. So with that, I'd like to introduce Planning Manager Fabiola Zillian-Melliker. She's sitting right there, working hard with the support staff. Melanie McCann, our Principal Planner. I just want to say thank you, Melanie, for taking over this project during the pandemic, and you did a really good job, so thank you. Our Senior Planner, Ricardo Soto and Jared Rivera, both of whom also worked very hard during this process to provide the support staff and work that we needed to get this document to where it is today. We also have Zed Kalula with our Public Works Agency, Ron Ono with our Park and Recreation Community Services Agency. From our consulting team, both online and here in person, we have Colin Drucker. He is with Placework. He worked on the bulk of the general plan update documents. Joanne Hatfield, she's also with Placework, and she is our advising consultant and lead consultant on CEQA issue. We have Mike or Isabel with IBM consulting team for the transportation element. We also have Amy Hort participating virtually, and she is with BPK Partners providing us with CEQA legal advice. On call, we also have Bill Dilo from IBI team, as well as Nicole Vermillion with Placework. Thank you, everyone. So tonight I'll be going over a presentation jointly with Melanie McCann. We have a long presentation, but I won't be sorry for it because it took us a long time to get here, and we want to make sure that every aspect of the document get presented. So we'll be going over the purpose of the element in the general plan. Very importantly, the community engagement process that we conducted over the past 6 years. We will highlight the elements as well as the goals and policy and implementation action, its environmental impact, and the recommended action for the Planning Commission to the City Council. So the general plan is a long-range policy direction document guiding the physical development, quality of life, economic health, and the sustainability of our community over the next 25 years. It is important to note that this document is a policy and a vision guiding document, which will require the city to follow up by updating the local ordinance and regulations in order to implement and enforces the adopted goals and policy of the general plan. Early on in the process and through the extensive community outreach, 5 core principles were developed and adopted by the community. And they are, as you see on the slide at the bottom there, they include culture, sustainability, health, education, and equity. These core principles are reflected in each and every policy within the document with a symbol representing their place in the document. In addition, it was also determined very early on that because environmental justice issue was such an important issue in our community, therefore we elected and our community elected to incorporate environmental justice into each and every principle and policies of the general plan instead of having its own document. That is to reflect its importance in our community as they are interwoven with the 5 core principles. In addition to that, we also highlight the need for implementation and the champion of the implementation for each policy as they are denoted in the implementation action plan by the agency and by when they're due. So that is the intent and as well as the goal behind the symbology within the document and the way that environmental justice as well as a core principle are denoted in our document. So before I go on to the next series of slides, world-class cities, they are often instantly recognizable by their built environment, the people and the culture they represent. So in the next few slides, I'll share with you some images and see if you can guess along with us as to which cities they represent. This one should be easy. New York.
That's
So I mean, we are a city poised to be a world-class city with world-class amenities. We have arts, we have culture, we have museum institution, we have the zoo. While we don't have an airport, but the airport call sign is SNA, and it is for Santa Ana. We even have a wind named after us seasonally, right? So we are poised to be a city that is world-class in status. And I believe that we have a general plan that will get us to be a world-class status city as we are the downtown city for Orange County. At this point in the presentation, I would like to share the presentation with Melanie McCann, who will be going over our shared vision as well as the remainder of the slides. Melanie?
Thank you, Min. It's a little bit of an adjustment after years and years to come and sit up close to the dais here with you all. So I'm happy to be here. So I'm going to go ahead and read this again. You heard it before, but I think it's like a good poem or a good mantra to repeat it. So the vision that was pulled together from the community and the General Plan Advisory Group was that Santa Ana is a city that promotes the health and wellness of all residents. It has a civic culture that actively embraces the power of diversity. Our city invests in resources that create economic opportunities for the next generation and is a community that celebrates our past while working together to create a sustainable future. So as been mentioned, we have our values, our guiding principles, if you will, and our 11 elements that we're going to be working through tonight. So just a refresher, those elements that are on the left side are those that are required by state law. The one yellow is the housing element that's on a separate track. And then those on the right are those that are optional elements, a few that are new to our city and a few that have been part of our community in the past, like urban design and economic prosperity. And then bottom right, again, acknowledging that environmental justice is integrated throughout all of our elements. So this bright colored slide gives us a pause for the passage of time. Starting in the end of 2015, we've gone through in 2015 community meetings organized by ward. 2016, we had more community meetings and one-on-one interviews, youth outreach, etc. 2017 is our, we had 14 general plan advisory group meetings, and if anyone's listening from that group, we really appreciate all the time that was put in with those individuals, which were an array of folks from representing different aspects of the community. 2018, we ended that year with creating our policy framework, which was the goals and the policies for each of the elements. And then with that, we moved forward in 2019 to have more workshops related to the focus areas. And those workshops were done geographically by each focus area. And we also had a land use survey online. And of course, study sessions along the way to keep the communication open. In 2020, life changed a little bit, but we kept pursuing. We had our environmental impact report scoping meeting at the beginning of 2020. We had some presentations and a special video that focused on what environmental justice was and how it was addressed in our general plan. And that was communicated in Spanish, Vietnamese, and English, and it's still available on the website. We closed out the year towards the summer with 2 virtual community workshops. And then in fall, as some of you might recall, the general plan came before you, and the decision was made to pause and continue to do a little bit additional outreach. So 2021, a lot of resources went towards collaborating to do the environmental justice efforts. We held a roundtable with some of our local advocates and interested parties, and they helped to guide that outreach program. We really appreciate their time and efforts. We went on to do an environmental justice survey and hold virtual forums, and the next slide will go into that a little bit more detail. So with that, I'll just kind of fast forward to that. We had with the commission, as you might recall, we had a meeting, a public hearing regarding the recirculated program EIR, and we're before you today to once again have some conversation on a potential adoption or recommendation. So there's a lot of words here, but it's just to reiterate, it's same information that's in your staff report, but it's just to further emphasize the outreach that was conducted along the way. So over 60 community meetings and workshops. As we mentioned before, we worked with the 5 focus areas, again, translators and outreach. We distributed the online survey to 650 respondents, which our survey response wasn't as much as we would have liked, but we feel that it still was representative of the community, and we were able to extrapolate from that. We also did direct mailers to those that were property owners and tenants in the focus area and within 500 feet of the focus area. As I mentioned earlier, we had multilingual videos. We had an initial one as we kicked things off to explain what each of the elements were. And then we also had another round of videos to help with environmental justice specifically. Of course, we have a dedicated web page that everyone can follow as they desire. Communication linkages, as you know, is neighborhood leaders, and we made a point to connect with the Comlink meetings and share information and updates. And very importantly, we had meetings with environmental justice groups and held roundtables. And I'm sure some of those individuals will be part of the discussion tonight. Those include Madison Park Neighborhood Association, Logan Neighborhood Association, Artesia Pilar Neighborhood Association, Orange County Environmental Justice, and other folks like UCI and Willowick. There was a variety of folks involved in those roundtables. Some roundtables had a theme of lead contamination, others had a theme of displacement, but we obviously made a point to collaborate on that in that area. And then it's sort of easy to forget some aspects of the pandemic, but in the peak of the pandemic, if you will, we were at 100 CARES events that obviously were there to help the public and encourage vaccination and safety. But we had booths out there as in the environmental justice neighborhoods to try and share some information. And then, of course, as you know, we had planning commission study sessions, city council study sessions over time. And throughout the years, there's been some one-on-one meetings with planning commission and city council. So we are all pretty familiar now with SB 1000. Just to remind ourselves, it requires you to identify where are your disadvantaged communities. And the map you see here today is the most recent with the latest updated data. Just since the last time we met, we gained 2 census tracts and we lost a census tract as far as what's considered an environmental justice census tract. But again, SB 1000 talks about incorporating policies that reduce the health impacts in these areas where folks are being adversely impacted, and to develop policies to prioritize these communities for improvement and to engage those communities in the decision-making process, thus the extra effort throughout the last 5 years and in particular in 2021. So this is, again, just the highlights of the environmental justice outreach. So on the right, you see the flyers, and trilingual. We had the groups of neighborhoods, 10 different virtual forums, January through May. We collaborated with the neighborhood leaders. Some of them were really wonderful and helped us put yard signs up and helped put survey boxes on in their neighborhood. So we collaborated with them and the other community serving organizations to get the word out. And that we closed that particular effort out, if you will, with an in-person open house in August of 2021. And we want to again thank those from Madison Park and from Orange County Environmental Justice and Orange County Water District. They were part of a panel that helped share some of their experiences and their involvement in the general plan process and some of their good works that they've been championing. So during that effort, the top part there are the themes that were discussed. So of course, air quality and water pollution, the idea of improving public facilities, infrastructure, physical activity, food and health options, and civic engagement. So those were the things that we talked about, and people were surveyed their opinions on it as well. We did encourage folks to participate by rewarding those to be in a drawing with a $100 gift card. So that was nice to be able to do that as well. And then the things that we changed in the general plan or refined were in a track change document, so you can see the edits that's available online and would have been part of your staff report packages, if you will. So the last part to touch on with the environmental justice engagement, the survey asked, what were your most important to you that you think needs to be addressed? And the one that was the first choice was additional public parks, open space, and community centers in walking distance to home or school or work. The second was more information, so folks could learn more about the conditions in their neighborhood that are affecting their health. Thirdly, the need to remove heavy industrial uses near their home and sensitive areas, parks, etc. Fourth was informational workshops regarding tenant protections and wrongful evictions. And last but not least was educational programs regarding lead paint and soil contamination that particularly focused in the environmental justice areas. So with that, we transitioned to incorporating more refined policies and actions in the general plan. And as you might recall from past study sessions, the document's organized into 3 different volumes. Some of the elements relate to the built environment. Volume 2 is the natural environment, and 3 is more related to services and infrastructure. The way that it's designed is to be user-friendly and visual, as you can see by the awesome picture on the left. So as mentioned before, each of the policies has a little icon next to it that reflects the value that it helps to express. And then, as you can see, there's where the equity icon is, and a little EJ in the corner are those that also further environmental justice efforts. Each of the elements has an implementation plan. And so this, if you will, is how do we get to those policies and goals? How do we make change in the community? So you have the actions in the middle. On the far right, you have the agency, the city agency that's the lead to make that happen. And then you have the target year for completion of those particular tasks. So we're going to go through each of the elements just briefly and just refresh ourselves on them. So the first one in the services and infrastructure is the community element. So this is a new element, but in some ways it's part of our old elements. It includes education, and some of you might recall in the 80s, Education First was the city's theme, if you will. And so we had an education element, and education is now included in this community element, as well as wellness, health, and other things that affect programming and quality of life. So one policy that's under this particular element talks in terms of exploring the feasibility of a city public health department with focusing on enhancing local health access, et cetera. So that's a substantial policy right there. And then the actions below, I won't go into all of them in the time that we have, but each of these are actions, and they reference the number in the implementation plan that further the goal. The one example which I'll share is under the community element is creating a health metrics. So this one states that we would engage the Orange County Healthcare Agency and others to monitor health indicators, to measure the success of our general plan through that particular lens. So that action of itself was part of an evolution in working with our community serving organizations and refining that action, if you will, to hold us accountable, if you will. The next element to touch on is our mobility element, the blueprint for how we move people, goods in a variety of fashions, and it's one of our required elements. I'll walk through again the basics of the mobility element is that it outlines a master plan for transit. So the area that you see in dashed blue is our streetcar, Orange County streetcar. So that's a key component in Santa Ana for transit. The yellow lines are Orange County Transportation Authority's opportunity corridors, where the service for those bus lines are higher level, more frequent stops, et cetera. So those actually are ideal for encouraging mixed use development from our perspective, encouraging active transportation, et cetera. So the other important component of the mobility element is all those different colors represent different bikeway systems. And as we speak later, there are some adjustments to this that we'll touch on, but this is our master plan for bikeways and introduces the new Class 4 cycle track, which has a protected lane. And this guides our future and has substantially evolved over the last, I'd say 5 to 10 years, with a lot of hard work from Public Works Agency. This one is actually our master plan of streets and highways. It's connected with the Orange County Regional Travelway, and so we need to be consistent with a bigger picture around ourselves. But these are the various street classifications that relate to, if you will, the width of a street and how that street functions. So as you can see that on the left, those are the arterial streets that are wider, varying from 144 feet wide to 100, depending on how what its purpose is. And then, of course, to the right, we go to the more local streets that have less throughput for vehicles. And the colors you see on the right map are those that are proposed to be changed. And it equates to about 20 street reclassifications. So that means it's going from potentially a 4-lane road to a 2-lane or 3-lane road, if you will. And most of those, well, let's say 20 of those reclassifications, or at least some of those, I'm sorry, are proposed so that we can incorporate safe bike lanes and in particular protected bikeways. And this is an example we looked at a prior meeting. The example on the left is actually what would take place on Chestnut. And that's where right now it allows for the street classification allows for 2 vehicle lanes in each direction. And this reclassification to a divided collector means that there's 1 vehicle lane in each direction. The middle one is a turn lane, but as you can see, it allows more room on either side to have buffered bike lanes and have the cyclists more comfortable in that environment. And then on the right side, you see similar scenario, but this is actually showing a protected bike lane. And those areas in kind of pink red are actually raised curbs. That would be decorative concrete in this particular situation. And this is an example on First Street, where with this redesignation over time, First Street would be changed from 3 lanes in either direction to 2 lanes in either direction, so that that thoroughfare could evolve to have bike lanes that are safe and allow us to transition over time to different modes of transportation. So a lot of words up here, but these are just some examples in the mobility element. Left side is policies. So not surprising, I'll just read for the most part the bold letters. A key policy is that we want a balanced multimodal network, and the redesignation of those streets we just looked at further that particular policy. And then complete streets. Along with that, we want to transform our travel ways to have amenities, street trees, landscaping, bus shelters, all of that make our streets not only complete with bikeways, but complete as far as convenient and aesthetic and pleasant for folks to use. And the enhanced street design kind of goes along with that, making sure that it's got character, it's got aesthetics, and it's functional. On the right-hand side, we've spoken about on a technical level, Public Works would be adjusting their street standards to meet this new complete concept. And then also for street improvements, incorporating low impact development so that there's infiltration, harvesting of stormwater, and all those other sorts of green things. So again, trying to transition us to being a smart community. The next element to touch on is economic prosperity. And this one we've chosen to highlight what we call community considerations. Each of the elements gives highlights on what we heard from the community, what they wanted to be considered in the element. So as you can see here, highlighted in the pink, one of them is to develop a local talent and a skilled workforce. One is to maintain a business-friendly environment. One is to attract industries with living wage jobs, invest in the downtown. Those are the sorts of things that we heard from the community. And so the economic prosperity element is intended to address those things. And below you see actions for employ local initiative, green business recruitment, and helping with our business license process for it to be more friendly and work with our small businesses. So the next element is the public services element, and that's to provide all the different public facilities and public safety components for our community. One of the policies is to require the development and rehab of any public facilities to be done such that they promote energy efficiency and resiliency. So that's a policy commitment that would be part of this. And then some of the actions related to that are that we would continue to do our infrastructure master plans, many of which are done every 5 to 10 years, and technology upgrades, et cetera. So there's a number of actions that support that in the general plan. Conservation element, also a required element about conserving our natural resources. Santa Ana is pretty urban, but we still have some natural resources to preserve. And one of the policies related to that is to consider the impacts of stationary or non-stationary vehicles, if you will, on existing sensitive uses to minimize health risks. So those sensitive uses are schools, parks, residents, et cetera. So again, that's a policy, it's a broad item. And the actions to further that is, some examples are that to update our climate action plan, which City Council has prioritized that for 2023. And that also we have an interagency team that is working to gather environmental data and post it for the community, and then also have a group of interagency staff that's working on some of the environmental issues with our community. So, and this elaborates on that further. The interagency team would monitor and make recommendation. It says here on hazard issues, but on environmental hazard health issues, and share that information on a portal. We've actually already started that. It's under our environmental justice section of our general plan page. And what we've done is we've highlighted state, county, and we're trying to also work to include our advocates and have their good works, the studies that they're involved, and where folks can go if they have any issues or suggestions on these subjects. So the next important subject is our open space element. And again, that one is required, and it's intended to preserve our open spaces and value all of that as it relates to recreation, health, and conservation. So one of the things identified in that as a policy in that element is for new development that's in park deficient areas and in environmental justice areas to prioritize the creation of new parks over the collection of impact fees. So historically, those fees have gone in a variety of fashion, but this policy affirms to use those funds for new public land. And we'll go into some of the actions related to furthering some of our open space goals in just a moment. One of the other things that we wanted to touch on is just the statistics, if you will. So just to clarify, when we do the parkland ratio in context of the open space element, the tradition is to use the public parks, the parks that the city has the authority to program during normal use hours. So this list here summarizes those for the most part, but we do not include joint use agreements. We do not include the golf courses or the cemeteries in that calculation. So absent of those, our parkland ratio is approximately 1 acre per 1,000, and that's based on collectively a little over 340 acres of public parkland and resources. So as you can see, there's other open spaces, 282 acres. Joint use agreements that we have in place now is a little over 31. But again, those are extra open space amenities, but are not included in what we consider our park acres per 1,000. So this communicates the areas in the fuchsia, I'll call it. Those are areas that are outside of being served by a park. So there's standard service radius, either a half mile or a fourth mile, depending on the size of a park. And those areas in the pink purple are outside those service areas. The Southwest, for instance, a lot of that area is industrial. So that is a different perspective. But as you can see in central, north central area, there's a fair amount of areas that are not served well by parks. And this is to reiterate again, the existing scenarios, we have about 1 acres per 1,000. This spells out from the focus areas, we have the estimated existing population in the second column to the left. The next column to the right estimates the build out population if that build out that's proposed in theory would happen. And if we go with that estimate, with no additional parks, just the ones that are in the ground now, we'd be at a 0.8 acres per 1,000. So these are the things that the policies that have been put forward. Some of these are new. Some of them have been adjusted since we saw you last. And the idea is to reaffirm the commitment to achieving more parkland. So the upper left is the park master plan that you've been hearing about over time. And that is estimated to be complete this spring. And its intention is to create and guide the future acquisition, development, prioritization, et cetera, for our park system. One of the other policies is to maintain the achieving the 2 acres per 1,000. And then also the last one we talked about earlier is requiring new development to prioritize park land over the collection of fees. The ones on the right are the actual actions, and and we've talked about that before, but we talked about a city interagency forum for the different agencies to pull together and be communicating on opportunities that otherwise might slip through the cracks. Having an annual open space summit, again, a great opportunity to pull everyone together, residents, interest groups, et cetera, and then again, hold the city, hold all of us accountable to our goal for moving forward to meet our park standard. And we've talked about a park opportunity fund, a park foundation, et cetera, different tools to find additional funding, because that obviously is critical to moving forward. So this is one of the actions. We'll just highlight it for a moment. This one is about the public parkland. And this is on our action item is to update the city's ordinance and require larger residential projects to require new parkland within a 10-minute walking distance. And as part of looking at that ordinance, consider ideas for incentives to encourage developers to maybe join together to create larger public open spaces that are developing within the vicinity of each other. So that's an important effort that we would work through. The next one to touch on more specifically is this notion of a park foundation. The idea is to consider or actually establish a 501c3 foundation to establish fundraising to support the Santa Park system. So again, over the last year, it's, there's different ideas to help support getting our parkland ratio to a healthy location, to a healthy place. So there's a lot of text here. This is a new item as well, and this is actually included as a mitigation measure in the recirculated EIR. And so I'll read it to some degree. So this is one where the city, as a mitigation measure, would monitor new residential development within the Dire 55 focus area, and development proposals that are 100 or more units would be required to prepare a public park utilization study. And that study would evaluate that project's potential to impact existing public parks within a half-mile radius within the city. And that evaluation would include, population increase, et cetera. And if the study determines that project would incrementally create cumulative impacts and further diminish the resource to existing parks, then there would need to be measures to mitigate that, which could include land dedication, fair share contribution, et cetera. And that mitigation measure would need to be completed prior to issuance of occupancy. So that's pretty healthy, if you will, mitigation measure that has been included in the environmental impact report. So moving on from open space, if you will, an important component is noise as well. Even if you have open space, if it's super noisy, that quality of life is not ideal. So the noise elements mission is to try and establish noise levels and mitigation so that that it's at a helpful level. So the policy is to reduce noise generated from traffic, roads, transit, et cetera. So that's our policy effort. And then through our actions, we would be looking at best practices for mitigation of noise and coordination with other agencies like ALUC as we do periodically with other developments that require that. So the safety element, another required element, and importantly, it deals with seismic issues. And one of the policies is to collaborate with other key agencies and to inventory where our hazardous materials are and proactively mitigate potential impacts. So that is quite an important policy there. And then some of the actions related to that is the city still working to complete their emergency operation plan, get that adopted. And there's some specific measures related to lead contamination and evaluating earthquake vulnerability assessments on some of our buildings so we can be proactive in that manner. So for those that that our historic resources are near and dear to you, this is a celebration that we have. This is our first historic preservation element. And one of the policies is to explore promoting our historic preservation program such that it's equitable, accessible, and robust. And to achieve that, we want to keep refining our historic design standards to preserve those areas of the city that are our treasures, and maybe look a little bit further at our adaptive reuse ordinance, adaptive reuse of existing buildings that can be converted for a second life. And then, as you can see too, there's public art cataloging and that sort of thing with murals, et cetera, that would further preserve our history. So the urban design element is actually an element that kind of threads things together, if you will. It takes our physical environment, be it the public right-of-way or the private built environment, and it tries to kind of seam it all together so that it's a pleasant, aesthetic, people-oriented place. So the policy is to ensure that architecture and landscape design activate open space and open areas to promote community interaction and give us a nice aesthetic quality in our community. So some of the things related to that are enhancing some of our gateways to our city, looking at our public realm, and when we have development, looking at the fees related to our public realm. So not only maybe are we getting development improvements, but we're also mindful of the public realm adjacent to that because it's all intertwined. So the urban design element kind of catches all those different finer grain things. So this is the element that a lot of folks are most interested in. And it provides a long-range plan for our physical development. And just from a goal perspective, it's to provide a land use plan that provides for quality of life while respecting our existing community, which is key. So with that, this is an example of a action in the land use element that deals with air quality and water hazards. And this was actually one of the examples presented at the Environmental Justice Open House. And this standard asks to update the zoning code and evaluate requirements for buffers between polluting industrial uses and sensitive uses like residents, parks, schools, et cetera. So that's an action item to proactively improve the health of the environment. This is another one under the land use element, also an environmental justice action. And it talks in terms of engaging the environmental justice communities. And that would be through hosting a biannual or a quarterly roundtable with local stakeholders to guide and evaluate implementation of environmental justice policies. So a lot of these actions that you see are a commitment of resources for the city. So I just would emphasize that they're substantial in nature. And this is one of those that would encourage communication and continuing education amongst the community and accountability. Another action under the land use element, and this was a little bit of a byproduct of the displacement roundtable. We met, I think, twice, and this was to continue the collaboration with community organizations and residents to identify, evaluate, and implement anti-displacement strategies. So we have a few strategies, but continue to collaborate to find best practices, et cetera. And the idea is to address any unintended displacement consequences of vulnerable tenants and property owners due to the introduction of new development or change of circumstance. One more related to that is that local preference. So we have the opportunity now, and our housing division implements, is requiring priority for Santa Ana residents and workers when selecting tenants for affordable housing projects that the city, that receives some amount of assistance from the city. So that's been a really great opportunity. And I believe Judson Brown has shared that we've had great success with that, and being able to have our Santa Ana residents be a large part of our affordable housing projects that have been built. So with that, we're going to transition to the focus areas are the pink ones, and the existing land use plans are the blue. And so the blue ones I want to draw your attention to on the far left is the harbor specific plan. And then the one kind of along the 5 freeway with the hatching is for the most part the transit zoning code area. And then just to the east of that, to the right, where it says ME, is the Metro East. And those 3 are where we have existing mixed use development form-based codes that have, I'll call them somewhat tried and true. We will be talking about that in a few more slides on how that relates to the new focus areas. But as you can see, there's the 5 focus areas. And just to touch on too, how the development of the focus areas came about. So when we did have our general plan advisory group, we broke out into groups. People had maps, little bubble diagrams and brainstorming. Where do you think those areas are that are underutilized? Where do you think those areas are of opportunity? And so that was part of how those came together, and also the opportunity to connect our other development areas. And so you can see that the pink areas now kind of start to connect with our other development areas on our major corridors. So this is the build out table, lots of numbers here, but the area on the top, the one in yellow, shares with you what right now we have as potential growth in our existing plan areas, like the Midtown, Harbor, Main Place, et cetera. So there's an opportunity for 15,000 plus new housing units, 3 million square feet, and a little under 1,200 new jobs. In the focus areas, as proposed, there's an opportunity for another 17,000 housing units and over 2 million square feet of non-residential development, which could equate to over close to 7,000 new jobs. So this is the overview of the build-out scenario. So we're now going to walk through what you've seen before, but you can kind of absorb it a little bit more. This is the vision for the South Main corridor. And so these visuals are intended to kind of give a feel for what that opportunity area could be like. So the idea is to facilitate new opportunities, stimulate change, if you will, but preserve that environment as well. So create a more active and dynamic streetscape, realize a little bit more intensity on the frontage, and support pedestrian and non-motorized travel as in all of our areas. So on the left, you see just a little excerpt of the land use map, and the areas in yellow are what's already designated, and the general plan is low density residential. None of that is changing. What you see changing is the area that's in the pinky purple along Main Street. And that is our areas that for the most part have been commercial, general commercial is the designation. And this urban neighborhood new land use designation allows the opportunity to mix residential in there with mixed use and that sort of thing. And then at the very bottom of the corridor, you see that we've transitioned what's been commercial and a little industrial to what's called industrial flex. So that's an area that could allow for office, industrial, small scale R&D, creative spaces, etc. So that's the essence. And you see each of the designations has a density and a floor area ratio and a maximum number of stories. So urban neighborhood is a maximum of 3 stories. So as you can see with that single family on either side of it, the 3 stories, single family residential, as you might know, can go to a maximum of 2 stories. So that transition is there. And then also development standards will further refine that. So it won't be like you just get a 3-story building without any tempering of that. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. So this is an example on this, looking from the southeast corner of Warner and Broadway, just west of Main Street. So that's what's there now. And in theory, with the industrial flex, you could have this kind of environment. The next focus area is the Grand Avenue 17th. So these are some visuals for thinking on. And then as far as what the vision in this area is a bit of an urban village. Some folks have mentioned even the notion of a type of city place where you have an area that has mixed use residential, but importantly fosters community spaces and neighborhood serving amenities. And it can be developed with some live work, some artist space, but that actually is there's a little area of industrial flex that I'll show you in just a second. So the areas in light purple are where the urban neighborhood areas would be. And if we start at the north end, that would be urban neighborhood, which would allow for 30 dwelling units per acre, maximum of 4 stories. As you go further south, it would go down to 3 stories for urban neighborhood, 20 DUs per acre. And then as you get to the main arterials again at Grand and 17th, it transitions back up to 30 dwelling units to the acre. And then that idea of the creative spaces, you have a little area near Penn Way that is industrial flex that has been redesignated from industrial to industrial flex to allow some amount of transitioning over there. The other thing to note is the general commercial. Right now, the typical general commercial throughout town is at 0.5 floor area ratio. These 2 areas were adjusted to allow 1.0, again, to kind of complement the more urban dynamic of that area. And then as you see going south of the freeway, you see a little area of district center, which would be, it's where the old register building is, and further south that will allow for higher intensity over time and complement to the train station and such. And then towards the bottom, you see a UN 40 designation. So this is actually the southeast corner from at Grovemont and Hathaway, just west of Grand Avenue. And this one isn't our most popular rendering, if you will, but the idea is here, you see this sort of brick, kind of a 1-story structure, that it would be tempered back from the residential, and we'd have architectural standards to affirm that. So this area is the Santa Ana Boulevard area where, as you know, we've got the Orange County streetcar coming. And so there's some visuals of what that might look like. And there's 2 slides here that show the land use areas. So again, you'll see the squares, little dark blue squares are where the transit stops are. And the purple, if you will, urban neighborhood is located so that it surrounds those and would allow for 20 units, 20 dwelling units per acre. And in some cases, you go further east, 30 dwelling units per acre. And then there's also an additional area for a little more intensity for general commercial to serve those areas as well. And there's also a new designation of, I think it's on the 30 of this area here. This is a new designation called quarter residential, which allows 30 dwelling units per acre, not mixed use, just residential. That, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's not in that particular area. I mean, it's along the vicinity, yeah. Whoops, go back one. Right, so this is the remaining of that area. So this is looking northwest at Townsend and 3rd, and the streetcar would be in the background. And that's the opportunity in this area. So you see the single family to the right, and then the evolution, potential evolution in the surrounding area. The next area is 55 in Dyer, and you can see a little bit more intensity and opportunity here. So the on the map, the area in deep purple would be for the district center. As you may be familiar, the Heritage and another project is in that area. Mixed use project was just approved. So that would allow that opportunity to expand a bit. And that would be at a maximum of 90 dwelling units per acre and 6 stories. This industrial flex has a little different character to it. This is intended for a higher intensity and maximum of 10 stories. And the opportunity is that along the 55 corridor, there's a lot of visibility. There could be great opportunity for corporate identity, et cetera. So that's where this area has been identified to allow that to grow with that potential. So here's a visual of that area. And that's the potential opportunity that this land use plan would allow for. Last but not least, we have South Bristol. And that is an area that, of course, has some dynamics already going on with the South Coast metro area. And the idea is to introduce more mixed use. This particular area historically has had a district center designation, but it just has never evolved over to mixed use. But we think the time is right. And then, so this particular plan shows towards Sunflower at the south, we have District Center 5, which is the most intensive and would, if the market could bear that, it would allow the potential opportunity for a 25-story development, 125 units per acre, and then that transitions to DC2 north of MacArthur, north of MacArthur. And that would be a 10-story environment at 90 Ds per acre. And then it transitions further north to urban neighborhood with 3 stories. And again, you've got a lower intensity development on either side of that, more conducive with the 3 stories. So Buffalo Wild Wings may not always be there, but just so you can kind of get your sense of location. And so one version from a massing standpoint would be something like this, where these aren't exactly 25 stories, but as you can tell, they're substantial and they kind of complement what's going on, they're in the same family as some of the things that are going on in Costa Mesa. So we would bring some of that dynamic to our community. And again, the streetscape and the public realm would need to grow in that fashion as well. So the community and others have asked about, context and protecting the neighborhood and that sort of thing. So what we wanted to make mention is that that we are pursuing a consultant, and we've got funding through the LEAP grant from the state that's intended to help promote housing. And we're working to try and get a consultant on board to help with that. And they will be furthering the development standards so that, like you see here, say this is a single family house, they will affirm the guidelines that talk in terms of what should be the distance before the next building would be built, and then 2 stories, setback, et cetera. So this is an example of standards that we have in place now, but that these this updated design guidelines would further and refine. So I mentioned before in particular our 3 mixed use areas: Harbor, Transit Zoning Code, Metro East. And this is included, and actually one of the clarifications that's in your package is we would be transitioning this not a guideline, but as a standard. And this is intended so that, as example, in South Main, for an urban neighborhood 20 designation, you would look to SD 84 is the transit zoning code, and SB 2 is the harbor plan. You would look to these zoning areas and these design guideline areas for developers to construct what's compatible. And the visual you saw a moment ago, those types of setbacks and allowing for compatibility are already part of these design standards. So that was a measure that we've also included since you last saw the draft to further certainty for not only developers, but for residents as far as standards, so that the development is in context. And this is the same example here. So for each of the designations, we've attached it to either the Metro East, Transit Zoning Code, but different areas, different zoning that would achieve what you see here on the right. So this is an example of a development, another example of development for these types of zoning designations. So one of the things in your package was a few pages of clarification. And so I wanted to give you an example of that. So, whoops, I'm sorry. So one of the things we did as we went back to look at things is when this came before you before, for instance, Main Place, the floor area ratio was 3.0. And the philosophy that we approached at the time was, instead of having 20 different floor area ratios, we were trying to create an umbrella, and that the zoning underneath that would give you the detail. But there's some different laws in play these days that we wanted to go back and tighten that up a little bit. So for instance, the Main Place specific plan is entitled the specific plan for 2.1. So we went ahead and just adjusted that so that the FAR matches the specific plan. And the same thing, if you will, with City Place, that we just adjusted it to be a tighter fit. And we went through and did that in a couple of different areas so that the general plan and the zoning are a tighter fit. One other thing that you also recently, you got another clarification today that I think it's on your desk, and it just has a couple of minor clarifications, but one of them I wanted to bring to your attention is related to bikeways. So on the attachment that you see, we wanted to change out the bikeway master plan, and there are only 4 new designations, 2 which were adjusted because Public Works found new conditions where they thought they could do a class 2, they were only able to do a class 3. So, and Zed Kakula is here to kind of clarify if we have any questions. But in essence, that's what the clarification is, to add back in those bike lanes that have already been approved by City Council through the active transportation plan and through the prior bikeway master plan. So again, there's the clarification, the 2 sets of clarifications. So now we transition to, now that we've gone through our changes and the miscellaneous policies and actions, we're back to our environmental impact report. So as you know, we did opt to include the recreation as a significant impact. And so part of that, so that then required a recirculated environmental impact report. And I'm just going to go real quick through those steps. And these couple of slides, you actually would have seen them at the public hearing when we took comments on the recirculated environmental. So the draft was out from August 6th through September 20th. Then Planning Commission, we had the study session September 13th. We prepared our consultant and the team prepared responses to the comments. And you have those with you tonight. And then, of course, we are here at Planning Commission, and our intention is to work towards City Council December 7th. And if that is certified, et cetera, then there'll be a notice of determination. So these are the different topics that were analyzed in the environmental impact report. And the ones that are highlighted in blue, if you will, are those that were determined to be significant and unmitigated, or not able to be fully mitigated. So that's air quality, cultural resources, greenhouse gas, noise, population, housing, and the new one evaluated was recreation. So as part of the environmental impact report process, we look at different alternatives. And part of that is when we look at the different alternatives, we're still looking at what's our objectives of our general plan project, and do these meet the objectives of our general plan effort. So the no project scenario, reducing the intensity, and each of them had pros and cons to them as far as if they reduced impacts or not. And then there was what's called the regional transportation plan consistency alternative that has to do with SCAG's growth projections. And then the one that was added as part of the recirculated environmental impact report was the reduced park demand alternative, which reduced growth in a number of the focus areas. And while the regional transportation plan is considered, if you will, the environmentally superior alternative, we are still recommending moving forward with our general plan and the overriding considerations given our objectives and goals of our general plan. So just to recap, we went through the public comment period, and those public comments are included in your report. And the new chapters, if you will, that were evaluated were recreation, air quality, and hazards. And just to reiterate again, for a recirculated environmental impact report, the option that we moved forward on was where those that provide comments only provide comments on those 3 topics. It doesn't open up the entire environmental impact report. The other thing to just make you aware of is that we did process the general plan through the Airport Land Use Commission over a year ago, and they evaluated for consistency with airport environs land use plan, and they determined it was not consistent, and that was in October. So City Council last year filed what's required to override it. So they filed an override of the ALEC determination, and the process would be that it's actually a City Council action doesn't require planning commission's recommendation action, but the city council would have to take action to override on December 7th for things to move forward. So that's a lot of things to cover, and but with all of that said and done, we think that what you have before you is a net benefit to the community. It achieves sustainability, it preserves our culture, it promotes health, education, and equity. And with that, we suggest that you recommend the City Council the adoption of the final recirculated program EIR, as well as the findings and statement of overriding considerations and mitigation monitoring reporting program, as well as the actual general plan amendment number 2020-06. With that, we're open to any kind of questions you might have.
Thank you, Melanie, for that detailed presentation. As you can see, Planning Commissioner and the public, even with all the work that's been done and all the effort that's been put in, this is just the beginning. The heavy lifting is going to come with the follow-up work where we have to update our ordinances and regulations, as I previously mentioned, in order for us to make these policies implementable and enforceable. So that's where the real heavy lifting is going to be done, is the follow-up. And as this is a living document, it is something that we will continue to evaluate as we move forward within the general plan itself. It is designed in a way where annually we have to report back by state law. But in addition to that, we also have a 5-year cycle where we continue to look at the changing environment and evaluate whether or not our original vision is still compatible and consistent with our changing environment. As you saw, 2020 was an exceptional year, and it changed quite a number of issues that our community faced. As a result, we have to make that change. So it is a living document. And a bit of housekeeping. We did receive comment late about 5 o'clock from the city of Tustin, and that is going to be provided to you, requesting that, commenting on the general plan and requesting for the Planning Commission to consider their request. In addition to that, I failed to also thank our support staff, Christina, Leonard, Maria.
No, it's after once you click on the English screen, did it start playing over in the menus?
That's what I said.
Right now, my whole. She's watching us live. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. There you
We apologize for the delay right now. Those of you who are in Zoom, we are having some technical difficulties, and we will start back up in just a couple of moments. Thank you.
I don't always downtown. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Everything we talked about, or it's gonna start again?
While it was down, YouTube won't have it. Now, there's a Zoom recording. The other two.
Yes, we have your problems with the Zoom link, and I are we're going to do this in just a second. Thank you.
Oh, fine. You're off the hook.
Okay, we'll reconvene the meeting at 8:34. We were having some technical difficulties. We had not closed the public hearing prior to recess. And so I'll ask if there are any other members of the public that would like to comment. Are both our online commissioners present?
Commissioner Aldereti and Commissioner Ramos, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear.
Yes.
This is Commissioner Aldereti.
This is Commissioner Ramos. I can hear as well.
The next person who can speak is Dell. You can mute yourself and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Yes, Dale Helvig, thank you for bearing with me on my technical difficulties as well. I would like to thank Melanie McCann and the rest of the city staff for their work on the general plan update. I know it's been a long and hard process for them. Santa Ana's Golden City Beyond, a shared vision general plan, is the policy document that will guide the city for the next 25 years. And one of the things in the general plan is the open space policy or element that says open space is so important that its presence or absence can profoundly shape the physical, social, mental, and economic health and well-being of our communities. And so it's puzzling to me how we can have a land use element, specifically the map LU-1, show all the development that's going on in this focus areas and not 1 acre being added to the park space. And in fact, one of the changes that's been made is it's no longer going to be 2 acres of parkland per 1,000 people, but just 2 acres of land per 1,000 residents. So it's a subtle difference, but I don't know what that impact is going to be overall. The other thing is the general plan advisory group did not designate the proposed 17th and Grand area as the focus area that's being shown to you guys tonight. What was being presented was substantially less than that, and through the course of time, sometime after June of 2019, that area was expanded, I assume, by city staff people. So the involvement with the community is questionable when city staff is making changes without really listening to the advisory group or to the residents in that regard. The environmental justice area has been a big area of concern for a lot of people. And the other thing that's puzzling to me is the lead and traffic and pollutants seem to stop right at the 5 freeway. It's hard for me to imagine that there's not lead issues or pollutants or traffic issues in Mayberry Park, Grand Sunrise, or any of the other communities just north and adjacent to the 5 freeway. And I'm wondering, with the increase that we're proposing with the focus areas, how is that going to affect the environmental justice areas going forward? Are we going to create more problems than we're solving at this point in time? The other thing is any focus area that's next to residential area should only be a maximum of UN 20, and limit it to 3 stories right next to single family homes. Putting in UN 30 should not be allowed. It's 4 stories next to single family. And so hopefully you guys.
Final call for any of the public to speak on Zoom or calling in. I will wait a few minutes, a few seconds. Chair, there are no more speakers.
Thank you. So I will now close the public hearing. And and bring it back to the commission. First, see if the commission has any questions for staff. Commissioner Pham, did you have any questions?
I'd like to start out with a few questions first.
Thank you.
I think this is either from Melanie or Min. Could you expand more on, I think Min was saying before that this is a living document and that it can be amended as we see fit in the future. If you could just expand on how that process would unfold itself, even if, to say this gets approved and we see that there's changes that needs to be made.
Thank you, Vice Chair Pham. As I mentioned and you noted, this is, even if it's adopted tonight, will be a continual living document. And as part of that idea of that it can be amended to meet our community needs as it change over time, we have a general plan amendment process that as a city we can go through and propose amendment to the document. So that is something that we can, as a city and our community, amend the general plan as we see when issues arises. In addition to that, as part of the implementation of the document, we have policies and implementation action that says that, number one, by state law, we have to report annually on the progress of our general plan. And two is on every 5-year cycle, we as a city would have our own review of the implementation of the general plan to see if we actually are performing in accordance to what the policies that we have adopted. But also that process can provide the opportunity for us to look at any necessary changes and adjustment to meet our current needs at that point in time.
Thank you. And just for clarification, what's the typical average timeline for developing what's the typical average timeline for developing a general plan? Just put our timeline in context with neighboring cities or cities with similar demographics size.
I can have our consultant share with me if I'm incorrect, but in general, the typical timeline is between anywhere from 18 months to 3 years, depending on the complexity of the issues. But we have been almost 6 years, but Colin, you have a lot more experience with general plan EIR as well.
Yeah, Colin Drucker with Placeworks. 18 months is a very aggressive, everything goes perfectly well, smoothly. About a year of that is the environmental process. So that's definitely towards the low end of the spectrum. 3 years is typically kind of the fast average. And then 5 to 6 years, especially in a complex, large jurisdiction, is not uncommon. I'd say 4 to 5 years is when everything kind of progresses and there's no additional efforts made beyond what's happened here.
We're on par with cities around general.
Yeah, I'd say you've taken more time. I mean, the desire or the decision to conduct another year of outreach has extended the timeline overall. That's something that doesn't normally occur.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Let me I want to build on that.
Yeah, sure.
Min, just to clarify, the review process that you talked about, like annual plus and the 5-year cycle, everything else, is that something that's reviewed internally with the district, with the city only, or is that something that possibly also gets reviewed by the state at some point in time?
So annually, we have to provide the state with a report on our annual compliance and performance with the general plan. And then what we have incorporated into our process is a 5-year community review. Us internally, we review our own performance.
And would that also include the compliance with things like SB 1000 that has been discussed?
It would be looking at all of, the answer is yes. It would be looking at all of our policies and action plans.
There's bills and there's active actions that are in the general plan that have been identified. And I'm just, there was some discussion with some of the people on the phone tonight to say, you know, that you're out of accordance with SB 1000. But the assumption is we would be able to fix that in the cycle that we've got, if that were to occur. If it isn't,
If that was the case, I would concur. However, we confidently believe that what we have done in the general plan, in terms of both the outreach that we have completed, in terms of the type of issues that we are addressing, the policy that we have put in place, the action plans that we're proposing, addresses all of those issues in ways that we can control. What we want to share is that we as a city locally regulate development. We regulate land use. We don't regulate water quality. We don't regulate air quality. We don't regulate soil contamination. We don't oversee those processes. We don't own the land. We do regulate land use. We regulate zoning. We have policies and action items in place to address those at the time when development occur. We require that environmental issues be evaluated. We require health risk assessment. We require that lead be evaluated so that they would need to be remediated as part of the development process. But again, I want to be very clear. We regulate land use. We don't regulate those areas. We don't oversee those areas. We don't have the expertise in those areas. They're regulated by AQMD, by Department of Toxic Substance Control, EPA. Those are all areas that we continue to coordinate as part of our process so that they can be addressed through our police power of zoning.
okay, good, thank you.
I have a follow-up on that. So the 5-year general plan review, is that mandatory or is that policy? And does it include the EIR?
It's land use, goal number 2, under 2.1, periodic evaluation, review, and if necessary, update the general plan every 5 years to affirm its vision remain consistent every 5 years. And this is part of the land use implementation action, item 2.1. We also have annual review, action 2.2, prepare a general plan status report annually. Review the general plan land use objective and map to ensure they continue to support the long-term land use vision. Amend text, goal, and policy maps as necessary to address new concerns, legislation, and changing conditions. So very clear, every year and every time.
Is that for the land use element only?
It's for the entire general plan,
Okay.
but it's under the land use policy implementation.
Thank you. Commissioner Ramos, do you have any comments or questions actually at this point?
Thank you, Chair. I do have a couple of questions for staff. I know that, well, first I'd like to thank the members of the public that joined us tonight. Thank you for your questions that you made as well. I want to reiterate some of those questions for staff to see if there are responses that can be provided tonight. First, I think all commissioners received the public comment letter that we received from the Deputy Attorney General, Rica V. Garcia. So I'm wondering if staff had a chance to review that letter before tonight's meeting, and if there's any response to what is stated in the letter.
We have, Commissioner, and we are ready to respond to that. The letter is an email from Rica Garcia. It was sent to us November 8th at 3:23 p.m. The comments addresses lead, and I'm going to quickly summarize. Really, it asks about, given the magnitude of lead issues in Santa Ana, has the city considered adopting policy that would require property owner to test for soil, lead toxicity prior to approving new land use or granting a development approval, require remediation before new development, adopt standards to require towards soil testing and development site where contamination is suspected, and require soil testing of property adjacent to property with hazardous soil level. I think the Attorney General, I don't want to have to, guess as to their understanding of the law, but it appears that, WICA does understand the limit scope of what a city can do. And she has addressed her issue very eloquently to look at the development process and what we require. The answer to the question is yes, we do have a policy under policy 3.29, which talks about updating the city's development review application process to require development to provide information regarding prior use of the site and history of hazardous material on the property, identify the potential contamination of hazardous materials or soil-led contamination to be remediated. So in that one short policy, it addresses all four of the AG's informal email to us, asking questions regarding our process on lead and soil contamination remediation through our development process.
Thank you. So to confirm, there would be requirements for soil testing at sites where contamination is suspected?
Yes. The answer is yes, under our development process, under this implementation of this action.
And how would staff determine which sites are suspected of having lead contamination?
So through site history review, every property that gets developed, especially when there's a change of land use proposal, there is a site environmental review process and characterization of the history and the use of the site, and whether if there are potential reveal of the history of contamination, then there is a requirement that the developer or landowner developing the land is required to address the on-site contamination issues, such as further identifying the contamination level, such as what remediation efforts are required and what oversight agency would be required to oversee that remediation. It's not the city. It's going to be between the developer and the oversight agency, such as Department of Toxic Substance Control, or oftentimes fire department, or potentially the Water Quality Board.
Thank you for that. I'm a little concerned that the identification of potential of sites that may be contaminated will rely on looking at the history of that site and its previous land use, because a lot of the properties in the city that have been identified by UCI and individual community groups as having contamination of lead are residential properties. And they may be sites that have been residential properties for a long time. So I'm wondering if the city can be a bit more creative in identifying these sites that may be contaminated with lead, because a lot of these sites may not have been gas stations before or anything else that we typically think of as having been contaminated with lead. And with that, I'm wondering if the city is working with the community groups such as OC Environmental Justice and UCI, and even a previous journalist that did a lot of testing of soil throughout the city and identified properties throughout the city, residential properties that were contaminated with lead. I'm wondering if the city has access to those results, or if there are any plans to work with those groups or to meet with them to better understand what sites they identified, so that the city can also be aware of that as we move forward and that policy is implemented. And if city staff is speaking, it's on mute.
Thank you. This is Melanie McCann to respond to you, Commissioner. So the answer is yes, that we definitely have been reaching out And I'd like to draw attention to an action item in the land use implementation action that says specifically work with Orange County Healthcare Agency and local stakeholders like Orange County Environmental Justice and UCI Public Health to identify baseline conditions for lead contamination in Santa Ana, monitor it, et cetera. And we are very appreciative of the data that UCI and Madison Park and Orange County Environmental Justice have brought forward to us and shared. And again, the action here is to work with the experts in the field, as in Orange County Healthcare Agency, and affirm that baseline data. And then the second part of that action is to collaborate with these organizations to secure grant funding for soil testing and remediation for residential properties in proximity to sites that have high soil lead levels, which would be in the studies that they have shown, particularly in EJ communities. So I think by that action, I hope it expresses that we have been in collaboration. We have been able to utilize the data that's out there, and our full intention is to continue that collaboration, and that focus on grant funding, I think, is particularly important to move forward with some actions that are outside of our normal city role.
Thank you. And I have another question on that before I move on to my other questions. So in the, did staff state that this would happen during the development process? And would this only happen when city staff is going to approve new land uses?
I couldn't quite hear the last part of it.
All right, will this only, will this only happen when the city is considering new land uses? Or how and when will this happen in the development process? So I'm wondering if this would apply, for example, to the construction of an ADU or of a junior ADU.
I'm sorry, I can't hear the last part. Construction of what?
Would this apply during the construction of an ADU? So if I'm going to develop something on my property, but I'm not, it's going to fall within the allowable land use, will I still be required to test the soil?
In terms of when you are developing on a piece of property that has already been developed with residential use, we would rely upon the existing information that we have. If we know or are aware of widespread lead or any type of soil contamination issue, we would be requesting for information that would be relevant, and we would require remediation. However, we also need to respect the fact that under state law, there are limited requests that we can have as part of the ADU review process. So while not necessarily apply to an ADU, it would apply to a new residential development where we have a large number of development taking place and there is a potential change of land use. Through our review process, we would require, for example, demolition. It's very common that we ask that we evaluate the existing conditions of the on-site structure to evaluate whether or not it has lead, asbestos, or other type of contamination material in the material that we use for construction. And with that information, we would be able to address it through remediation of the demolition. Now, I want to get back to history of the site. It is very relevant for us to understand the use and the history of the site, because with that information, we can have better understanding as to what are the probability of that contamination. Again, we can only coordinate and identify the issues to be addressed by the development community and overseen by the appropriate agency through our development process.
And I guess I would just add to that, that's why we have that one action about health conditions, is to go beyond that. where, for instance, the map that UCI has produced, where there's areas that they're showing concentration of lead contamination, they're in single-family neighborhoods next to the freeway. Those types of efforts are above and beyond, and that's why we talk in terms of collaborating with Orange County Healthcare Agency and the experts to see how we can begin to tackle that, because that's a bit outside the norm.
Outside of our.
Yes, outside of our normal scope.
Thank you. And then are there benchmarks for the lead and soil remediation that go beyond 2022? I know that was mentioned in the public comments. Residents were concerned about that.
I'm sorry, I think you need to repeat it one more time, please.
Yes. Are there benchmarks for the lead and soil remediation that go beyond 2022? There were public comments that reference that, and they're concerned that these efforts would expire after 2022.
So in response to that, some of our actions talk about collaborating, for instance, soon, 2022. That doesn't mean that we have an expectation that we will cure that or that it's a quick fix. It will take quite some time, as you can imagine, to deal with lead remediation for all the areas that are identified. So first step is collaborate, put your arms around the scope of things, look for funding, start some pilot projects, and then hopefully keep moving in a positive direction.
Okay, thank you. My next questions are on the open space element. So I'm wondering, how is the city, or how are we defining open space, and how are we defining parkland?
So you're asking for the definition of open space versus parkland, correct?
Yes, for this general plan update, yes.
So I'll try to attempt that. So parkland, I will offer, is public parkland. So that would be the small parks, large parks that the city owns and or has full authority to program throughout the normal service hours. Open space, in context particularly of the environmental document, they look at it a little broader. Just like the Public Land Trust, different organizations like that look at it broader. They would include things like golf courses. They might include cemeteries. They might include private parks or other things. But in terms of our general plan, it's public parkland when we say parkland. Does that help?
It does help. And I brought up that question because there was also public comment received by Rise Up Willowick, where they actually, I don't know if staff has had a chance to review that public comment. It's a letter that was also sent to the commission and staff in September, where they provide policy language for what that definition should be. And I believe that it should match they recommend that it should match the city's municipal code. So I'm wondering if city staff has had a chance to look at that and if that was considered, and what the city's thoughts are on that.
I think for this city, the public parkland is clear and clarified, if you will, in the open space element. We have not looked at putting any particular definition in the zoning code at this time. We could look into the letter a little bit more, but I think, as I just described, is how we treat public parkland versus open space. And it can be confusing, but the emphasis is parkland is public parkland. And that's, again, how I mentioned earlier, that's what we calculate our 2 acres per thousand. It's now at 1 acres per thousand. We don't add in those other open space things that we do not have control over to program.
That's correct. So again, as we want to make sure that we help define the scope of the city's role in terms of the development process, land use designation, and land use ownership. When we discuss parkland and public parkland, these are properties that we control, and the city use it as public park for public access for recreation purposes. So I want to make sure that it's understood that that's what we mean by public parkland. It's land that we own for public use for recreational purpose.
Thank you. So just to confirm then, implementation action 1.4, the no net loss of parkland would only apply to city-owned parkland.
That would be
Or would it
correct.
apply to, okay, so it wouldn't apply to open space?
Open space, as designated in the general plan, if it's privately owned, it is not within the net loss definition of the city's proposed net loss policy.
And did the city consider expanding that policy to include open space? While it may be on private land, I know that the city has other ordinances that regulate the use of private property.
So again, the expansion of the scope of the definition when it affects property rights beyond what has already been designated, there would be concern about our legal action resulting in a legal taking or the financial feasibility of a property. As it's zoned today, open space that we have in the general plan includes both public and private land that are used as open space. In terms of parkland and the definition of net loss, I want to focus us back on the fact that it is directly addressing land that we own, land that we control, land that is used for public recreation.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. I wanted to make sure that the public that commented on that understood what that meant. I'll ask 2 more questions and then pass the mic to other commissioners. Give me 1 second, please.
So do you have additional questions or would you like?
Yeah, sorry. I'm going to ask 2 more quick questions and then pass the mic so other commissioners can ask questions. Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, I know there were public comments mentioning other policies that might be more housing related, such as a tenant opportunity to purchase act, the right of first refusal, working with the community land trust. And I'm wondering if these are not directly mentioned in this general plan update because they'll be included in the housing element. Is that the case?
I can respond to that. Yes, Commissioner, there is a policy in our housing element draft that seeks to identify funding and partner with community-based organizations to support a community land trust program. So that would hope address the comment that was brought up.
Thank you. Okay, so I just want the public to hear that some of these other more housing related comments, there are policies that may be found in the housing element. And if not, then public comment can be provided on the housing element. And then just the last thing for now, I heard a lot of the callers today asking for a delay in this general plan update. And I'd like to ask staff if there is any impending deadline that the city has to meet, or how the city would be affected if this general plan update is delayed.
So the answer to your question is that we have delayed this adoption for 12 months, almost to the date. The city council has provided direction for staff, as with the community, to get this document adopted so that we have a comprehensive general plan addressing all of the issues that have been found to be relevant in our community. Obviously, the only required mandatory update to our general plan currently is the housing element, which is on an 8-year cycle, and we are mandated to complete that in 2022. That doesn't mean that our local mandate by our city council is any less important. In addition to that, our CEQA document, the analysis that had been done, the amount of information that has been compiled does have a life if we extend the approval and their consideration for additional time period, we will very likely need to basically spend additional time and additional funding to redo those analysis and update those analysis, such as traffic, such as air quality issues, and those are some of the environmental setting information that we will need to update. So the answer is yes, there is a need for us to move forward with the adoption of this document. We have shared with the community the commitment as to getting it done this year. And there is an expectation that we get it done this year.
Thank you. And what's the remaining lifespan of our CEQA document?
We have our environmental consultants on the line, Joanne Hatfield. Joanne, the question is that if we were to delay the general plan update, what additional studies would we need to do, and how much life left is in the document that we have in terms of the validity and currency of the data? Joanne, are you on the line?
Sorry, I was unmuting the wrong person. It varies because your various technical studies become dated. For example, a biology report for natural resources is considered old after a year. So a lot of those biological resources aren't a huge issue in the city, but you've got all your infrastructure studies, your capacities, information. Basically right now that information's a year old at least, because our notice of preparation was over a year ago for the original EIR. I think it was like March 2020. So, coming back and doing a recirculated EIR after the original EIR, we already lost a year or two, and then it really depends on the study. But anything that's a physical resource study, even cultural studies and walkovers and things become dated really quickly. So it's an EIR doesn't have a lifespan. It doesn't technically expire, but it becomes dated, and there's kind of rules of thumb based on the technical study of when it has to be revisited.
Thank you. And based off your knowledge of the technical studies that the city has had to do for this general plan update, do you know which of our technical studies would become dated first and when that would be, or when it would expire if it has an expiration date?
Traffic, even though you're no longer looking at level of service for the EIR, traffic always becomes dated quickly. And so VMT will as well. VMT, the city's in a great shape for that. You're in a transit oriented area, so that wouldn't be a problem. I would say off the top of my head, and I'm probably going to kick myself later and realize something else is much more relevant. I think your infrastructure studies and capacities are going to be really important. I think a good example, things become updated. The regional transportation plan and the RTPSCS, updated in 2020, it goes a couple years. We're finding studies like that. You really want to come back and update your environmental for that. The urban water management plan was just adopted in 2020. The EIR right now reflects 2015. So there's several things that become dated really, really quickly.
Would you be able to say how soon the soonest would become dated? Like, would you be able to give me a month?
I think the other thing is you've got to I think it's important that let me make another point. You can always certify the EIR without approving the project. And if you certify the project, then if you need to update it later, you've acknowledged that the EIR reflects existing conditions at the time and correctly analyzes the project that's proposed. Then if you need to update it, you can do an addendum. If you don't do anything with the EIR and you don't certify it this year, it becomes dated, and then you don't have that mechanism of an addendum to update it. Then you might be looking at a new EIR, a supplemental, well, what we just did, a recirculated EIR.
Thank you for providing that alternative option, but I still have the direct question of when, and I know you said now that if we don't approve the EIR this year, it might become dated. So I wanna see if I can get an answer from you with certainty on when that EIR or when our soonest or when one of our technical studies would become dated, whichever comes first, and if you could provide a month when that would be.
Joanne, if you can allow me to answer this in a different way.
Sure.
So certainly, there's nothing stopping the city from adopting this EIR tomorrow, 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road. There isn't a hard and fast deadline. The question becomes the validity of the information that was based for making the decision upon. So it goes into the legal validity of the EIR and the information that was used to make a decision upon. So the longer we let the information get stale, the likely of it being indefensible is much greater.
Thank you, and I understand that, so I'll also rephrase my question. How much time do we have before the EIR is no longer has valid data or valid information?
I think our consultant have answered that eloquently to say that it's been over a year since some of the study has been finalized and that it is dated. The longer we wait, the more dated information gets.
So I know that the longer we wait, the closer it becomes to losing validity. But what I heard the consultant say was that there was no concern with several of the initial technical studies that she mentioned. So I'm wondering if the consultant is able to answer that last question. How much longer do we have before the EIR or any technical study that the city has had to conduct is no longer valid?
It's just not black and white like that. I'm really sorry to say that. And again, the notice of preparation was March 2020, and some of the studies predate that. The civil engineering studies all got started before that. So you've got water, sewer, storm drainage, everything gets dated pretty quickly. There's, again, even trying to look at this, utilities, schools, everything gets old pretty quickly. You start looking at, again, bio is the first, biological resource, typically the first thing, and traffic that you come back and look at. And then everything else just continues to date. And Min has stated it perfectly. It becomes less and less of a defensible EIR.
Okay, so I'll ask just one last question and then pass the mic. So the city is also going through its housing element update, which we're hoping to approve in February of next year, which would be about 3 to 4 months, depending on how you look at it. Would the information in this EIR still be valid then, if we didn't approve it until then?
Melanie, do you want me to answer that one?
I mean, I think the public would like to.
Oh, no,
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, so, yes, of course. Knowing that the housing element update, the city's on a timeline to approve that by February of next year. I'm wondering if the information in this EIR would still be valid at that time, if this was approved on a similar timeline.
The answer is yes, the information in this EIR would be valid next February or whenever the housing element is anticipated. But right now, the housing element is taking a different track, not reliant on this EIR for CEQA processing.
Thank you. And that was all. I just wanted to understand that. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from Commissioner Alderetti?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple of questions. So thank you first for that discussion about the EIR. I still don't think if we were to take a break and take a pause that it would, the information would go stale. Yes, I understand it's a legal judgment, but there's risk and balancing risk with every decision you make, especially in the context of legal actions. And so I don't think a couple of months is going to really harm us in any way. But what I did want to know specifically regarding the open space element is the open space element park standard is, I think this is the aspirational one where we're trying to get to 2 acres per 1,000 residents. And I'm wondering how we arrived at that 2 acres per 1,000 residents as our sort of aspirational goal. And why wasn't it 2.5 or perhaps 3?
The response to that would be that we chose to stay with a traditional standard that we've had for a number of years. It's in the general plan presently, the 2 acres per 1,000, and to stretch to achieve that goal.
Okay, so right now we're at 1.02 acres per 1,000?
Correct.
And so the aspirational goal is to get to 2?
Correct.
Okay. So what's the underpinning of that? Is it that we think going from 1 to 2 is doable and going from 1.02 to 2.5 is not?
So I think, in terms of being able to achieve, as our staff have indicated, the current standard of 2.0 per 1,000 has not changed from our current general plan, as we have not been able to reach, the accomplishment of that goal. So therefore, considering looking at what we have currently in place and where our goal currently is, it's still very valid because we're not there yet. And, of course, we can ask for higher standards moving beyond that. However, it would be unrealistic if we're unable to at least achieve the goal currently. And as our goal is still currently valid for 2 at 1,000, that was the starting point for where the general plan establishes this standard.
I kind of understand that. Okay, I'll deal with that later. Okay, the other issue is in the land use, we have the 5 growth areas. And one of them is South Main Street. And I think I'll just pick that one out as one example. I'm very familiar with South Main, and I'm wondering what are the specific policies we have in place to prevent business displacement as well as residential? Because I know we typically talk about residential, but I think given the sort of more intense development there, we're going to see a lot of potential business displacement. And so I just want to understand what we're going to do to address that issue.
Let me start with a little bit of background on South Main. South Main focus area is a little bit unique in that there's a specific action that talks about that we are looking at doing a historic analysis for South Main and acknowledging the buildings and the form out there. It's like a little Main Street, right? And using that as a foundation. And then, so that in and of itself gives a little bit of a framing of some amount of preserving what's appropriate out there. As far as specific measures that would preserve the businesses out there, I'm not sure if Min would like to speak to that further, but I think our expectation and our hope is that we re-enliven that area We work with the urban form that's there on that main street against the, close to the sidewalk. And then we enhance it. So certainly we could work with our economic development staff in a more focused way. As you probably know, there's been a lot of efforts with South Main merchants, et cetera. So we could rekindle those conversations and make sure that we're preserving the businesses and actually making it a win-win for them, particularly since they've gone through all those improvements on South Main.
So the land use changes is a proposed land use scenario that looks towards encouraging development and for new development to occur. As land turnover, it is market driven. We understand the concern about anti-displacement, and the issue of that is addressed as part of our land use policy. It's policy 2.11 that discusses anti-displacement to collaborate with organizations and residents to identify, evaluate, and implement effective anti-displacement strategies to address unintended displacement of vulnerable tenants and property owners due to the introduction of new development. Again, as part of our development process, we will be looking at anti-displacement strategy to address the various issues you're talking about.
Well, that's helpful. I guess I'll be pretty clear about it. What I'm trying to avoid is a situation that we had downtown where a lot of existing businesses were displaced and it was under the guise of investment. And there was talk of it being market driven, but it was also city investment driven. And so I think there's a lot of character in that area. There's a lot of good longtime businesses, and I'd hate to see them go the way of what occurred in downtown. The other question I have is regarding mitigation monitoring program number 5.15. And it's just really a question of why 5.15 is limited to Dyer and the 55. So it says any park has to be built or expanded within 0.5 miles. And I think that's a good policy objective. I'm just wondering why it's only applicable to Dyer area.
In terms of open space, the general plan as a policy document is intended as a self-mitigating document, and therefore quite a number of our policies inside the document and action items addresses to a certain level of certainty that we have identified, such as the standard for attaining 2 per thousand, the standard for looking at requiring larger development to evaluate and create open space and prioritize that over payment of in lieu fee in area where there is a lack of open space. The Dyer and Red Hill area is one of those areas that when you look at the map of deficient park and open space area that potentially has is not serviced by existing park. And therefore, the mitigation that has been put into place in the IR is to help ensure that when a residential development occur, that because of this lack of existing park surrounding it that's nearby within a quarter mile or half mile radius, that the projects produce that open space in different ways and different options in order to mitigate the need for the park. And that's why that specific mitigation was there. The remainder of the areas, while we have a deficiency in this park standard overall citywide, you can see that in the map, all those areas are served by one park or another general of different size within the city.
Okay, well, thank you for that. That's my questions for now.
Thank you. Commissioner Calderon, did you have any questions?
Sure, I'll try to keep it pretty simple. A lot of questions were thrown out there. So here we go. Okay, so I heard the community talk about, community outreach, a lack of participation, a number of different barriers to pretty much participation. So my first question is, When did the city start communicating with the community in regards to the general plan?
Our first discussions happened at the end of 2015.
Okay. And then approximately on average, how many times did the city hold meetings for the general plan? Not necessarily like every month, but like in a year, like how many meetings?
I would probably say, I'm just going to throw out 8 to 10.
Okay. All right.
Just, you know, if it's a neighborhood, if it's a small group, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Large group.
How were residents contacted for these meetings?
So for those that were in the focus areas, we contacted them by mail.
Okay.
And 500 feet outside the focus areas. For the environmental justice areas, we also did a mailing for occupants and property owners within those boundaries. And then beyond that, citywide, we used our social media avenues with emails, flyers. I think I mentioned before, some yard signs, that kind of thing. So some posters in the shopping centers, that kind of thing, private measures.
Awesome. Okay. And how many languages were these was this like promoted?
Spanish and English always, and then Vietnamese 90% of the time as well. You know, a good amount of the time. And then we also had an opportunity for Cambodian translation for environmental justice.
Awesome. All right. And then my final question is, on average, how many people showed up to these meetings?
Well, let's see. I'm visualizing the focus groups, the focus areas, and I can imagine 85 people, 100 people to maybe a smaller group of maybe 35, 40.
Okay.
That
Awesome.
kind of
All right. So
range.
people did show up. Okay. Awesome. That is all I have. So thank you so much.
Commissioner McLaughlin, do you have any questions or comments? Okay. And I just have one question. You had shown a slide regarding the process we're going to go through for zoning with regards to those lines of demarcation where we have higher density areas located next to lower density areas. And I'm assuming that's going to be a public process, and we'll see that any ordinances that come out of that.
Right. The eventually, when we do the zoning code update to create additional standards, that will definitely be a public process. It'll come to the planning commission, be public hearings, et cetera. And as I mentioned as well, in the short term, the standards that folks would be directed to, developers would be directed to, are those that are already established and tried in our mixed use areas.
Right, and those will be reevaluated with.
Yes, those are reevaluated, refined, and best practices incorporated.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Wu.
The public talked about specific problems in a specific area, or said that they provided into the public record at some point to focus group or special meeting with their group. You didn't throw that away, did you?
You asked if we threw away some feedback that was provided to us?
No, I was being facetious. I'm saying that the information is captured somewhere and is used.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, there are some areas which we agreed to disagree on some of the recommendations. And so we talked about that and agreed to disagree. Some things that were felt to be beyond the city's purview.
The second part of my question is that in your mitigation recommendation for action is that you have a process to meet with those groups to specifically look at those areas and address them, because they may require further study or other thing. For instance, the lead contamination, it could be attributed to the fossil fuel from freeways, right? So we may have to look at our transportation policy again, or something of that sort. So by saying that you will amend things, it allows for a process to address these things in a very systematic process way that within our jurisdiction, as I hear from Executive Director Nguyen. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I would just reaffirm that our actions do have forums that we're committed to collaborate with the interest groups, and in particular Orange County Environmental Justice, and keep continuing to work on the lead contamination issue with the experts like Orange County Healthcare Agency. And that's part of our action plan to do that and continue those conversations so we can
And you
all.
mentioned UCI. So the framework and action item has those capability of following up on those things so that we could further study and recommend action that will come back to us, right? And to the City Council.
So the framework for our policy and action, again, rely back upon the authority that we do have and those that we don't. And it review and addresses how we can continue to communicate, coordinate, and getting these type of issues addressed and advocate for them to be addressed. The process that we engaged in resulted in over 78 EJ policies throughout the various elements, including land use, open space, safety. It's dotted throughout the document. Anywhere you see there's an EJ involved, it is environmental justice resulted action as part of our meeting process. We have over 75 environmental actions that we are committed to completing and addressing. And some of those addresses open space, making sure that in the areas of the city where we have most needs, especially in the environmental justice area, our policies are most aggressive to addressing open space.
Yeah, I just wanted to simplify the answers so everyone can understand. Let me give you an example. On Memory Lane in Bristol was a gas station. It's currently unoccupied because the gas station is no longer there. Historically, we could assume that there might be gasoline lead contamination in there. And so the city would be aware of it, but the owner is responsible for cleaning it up, right?
Correct.
And other agencies, if you know that it's there before something else is done, you would make sure that within your jurisdiction to address that before, say, a house is put on there, or you may recommend that a house is not placed there.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's why I'm trying to show the difference between the framework and the planning process to existing methods and regulations and processes that you already have to address specific issues. And I wanted to contrast it. Am I correct in assuming it that way? That we have a general plan, but we have specific measure to address specific issues.
Through the development process, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now we move to comments. I was wondering if there's any final comments or questions from Commissioner Ramos. Do you have anything you wanted to add?
Thank you, Chair. No additional questions for staff at this time. Just wanted to reiterate what I heard from the consultant, which was that if we waited until February of next year, we would still be okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually did have one clarification following up on the EIR line of questioning was, is the EIR addendum a part of that 5-year review?
So the EIR, once certified, establishes the setting and the information that we have. As we move forward and as time passes and conditions change, when we have new project, we would have to basically analyze the project at that point in time and evaluate it, how those compare to what we studied. If there are significant changes, then we would need to update the document and potentially the process. But if the document information is still valid, it is a projection of the growth, then at that point in time, the impact would be confirmed. And therefore, information will still be valid. So that's how the EIR is used as a certified document in the changing environment of new project, is that those updated study is to confirm whether or not we were right in our initial assessment.
Okay, so when a new project occurs, then the EIR is evaluated at that time.
Essentially, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry for being long-winded.
No, I just wanted to understand it fully. At this point, I would like to call for a motion to approve.
Well, this is Commissioner Alderete. Can I just make one comment?
Certainly.
Sure, thank you. So tonight, we've heard a pretty broad section of folks come before us from the north side, from central, from south side, west side, to speak to us. And as I counted it, I think there were 16 comments. Only one asked us to approve tonight. The remainder asked us to deny the general plan amendment or to continue the item. And it's my sense that that's what we ought to do, that we ought to continue this item. The question was asked whether or not there was anything regarding stale information, reports to the EIR that would make that impossible or would make that difficult. I didn't hear that. And so I would ask that the commission, my motion would be that we continue this item at least until the next meeting, possibly longer, but I think the community has been pretty clear that this needs more time, and I would agree.
A question or a motion?
I would support such a motion made tonight.
I'd ask for was that a question, Commissioner?
So mine was a motion. I think it was seconded by Commissioner Ramos.
Yes, I second Commissioner Alderete's motion to delay this process.
But wasn't the chair in the process of making a motion? Calling for a motion? Okay. And then you rose to the point of order to ask a question, you made a motion.
There is a motion on the floor right now that has been seconded. However, before that motion was made, the chair, I believe, had been calling for a motion, if I understand correctly.
Call for the question.
So this is Commissioner Alderete. There was no, prior to me making the motion, there was no motion on the floor.
All right. So we will take a roll call vote on the motion. First, I'd like to open it for discussion. Do we have any discussion on the motion? And second?
Clarification.
Can you repeat the motion, please?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, the motion was to approve, to delay the approval of the draft of the general plan amendment, and as well as the final recirculated program EIR until our next meeting.
So to continue it for one meeting.
Different.
Commissioner Alderete, would you accept the friendly amendment?
Sure.
Continue
So
to what point?
yeah, so I'll say my friendly amendment, and then Commissioner Alderete can decide whether or not he'll accept it. But thinking of the month that we're in, continuing to the next, I feel that if we just continue to the next meeting, it might not be enough time. And also considering that the holidays are coming, I would feel more comfortable giving staff additional time to address the public comments that were heard tonight on the subject of community outreach, and perhaps providing additional or more specific policies. So I would feel more comfortable seeing this come back to the commission in either January or early February. But Commissioner, that you can interpret that as you like. I'm just worried that in the spirit of delaying, I think it's to ensure that the community feels that there has been adequate outreach and engagement. And I worry that just continuing to the next meeting doesn't provide the opportunity for that.
You bring up a good point. I had not thought of the holidays.
That's being proposed to the motion.
Yes,
so
I'll accept.
I've recommended an idea for a friendly amendment to Commissioner Alderete, and he can now interpret it as he wishes and amend his motion if he would like.
Yeah, I had, so thank you for that amendment. I had not considered the holidays in all of this, which probably speaks more to the fact that I work a lot. So I think that amendment is fine to come back in January.
Yes, Chair and Commissioners, there had been a motion, and I believe there was a second before the motion was made. It appeared there was going to be another motion made. Unless there's a substitute motion made, then the motion that is on the floor now is subject to discussion. That is, unless there's a, like I said, a substitute motion made. And I don't know if that was the intent before this discussion began.
Yeah, if there's a competing motion, I'll entertain that as well.
Sorry, I'm confused. So Commissioner Ramos made a friendly amendment. I listened to it. I had not thought about the holidays and what that does to staff's time and the timing of the next meeting. So I thought, yes, coming back in January 2022 would make sense. So I accept that amendment.
So we've gone from a motion that was to continue this for one meeting, and it was a second for that, to now we have an open-ended discussion as to when it would be put in front of the Planning Commission again. I mean, really, those are two, in my mind, those are two separate motions.
So I will second the updated motion that Commissioner Alderete has made.
Second, the first motion. That was the second. So that's where we should be at this point in time.
And I am now seconding the updated motion.
For clarity purpose, I think it would be helpful if the maker of the motion stated it clearly, and then it be subject to a second if that is the case. To be at this point in time, the content of the motion is a bit unclear.
Sure, I'll do that. So the motion is that we delay until January 2022 adoption of and consideration of the final recirculated program EIR number 2020-03, including the findings and the statement of overriding considerations and the mitigation monitoring program, along with the general plan amendment number 2020-06.
If I can get clarity before a second is made as to, with the continuance, what are you asking staff to do? What have we not done? And what needs to be further completed between now and the meeting where this item is being continued so that we can understand what is necessary?
Okay, so not that I have to respond to that, but I will. And I think Commissioner Ramos stated it well, that a number of speakers, probably over 10, came and asked for additional time because they didn't think their concerns were heard. I heard that time and again from almost every speaker. So that is what I want to be done. I want outreach to be done to Rise Up Willowick, OCEJ. Those are the ones that I could remember off the top of my head.
Okay, so we have a motion to postpone the meeting to January 22nd. Was that the date? January 2022.
Yes, January 2022. And I will second that motion, hoping that it comes back in the second meeting of January, unless staff feels that they have met the needs of the public commenters tonight before that.
Can I?
So I will second the motion that this be brought back in January. And I don't know if staff will have enough time to do the appropriate engagement by the first meeting in January. So if not, I would like to see it in this during the second meeting in January, but that is up to the discretion of staff.
Can I entertain competing motions, or do we take them as a matter of procedure?
If there is a substitute motion made following the making of the original motion, that motion is then subject to a second. And if the substitute motion is seconded, then that motion is considered first.
Can we make this simple? It seems like we have a motion and it was seconded. So is this the discussion stage now? But that usually follows the first and second before a vote.
So Commissioner, you have the option of discussing. You can also vote on the motion, or you can provide a substitute motion.
I don't hear any call for a question, but I have a question. We're not the only body that needs to approve this. We have to coordinate with the city council as well and their calendar.
Correct.
And specifically, we heard a lot of comment, but specifically, I don't know what is being corrected. And the two motions seem confusing to me. And
Do we have a motion to postpone the meeting to January 2022? And it was seconded. There a substitute motion? I didn't hear what you said, Commissioner Wu.
there's a first, we have an option to ask question, we either vote that up or down, just like we did last time.
Right.
Why don't we do this? Can I just call this is Commissioner Aldedete. Can I just call the question?
We'll call for a roll call vote.
Yep.
Commissioner Alderete,
Yes.
Commissioner Calderon,
No.
Commissioner McLaughlin,
No.
Commissioner Ramos,
Aye.
Commissioner Wu,
No.
Vice Chair Pham,
No.
Chair Morrissey.
No.
Motion is been denied with Commissioners Calderon, McLaughlin, Wu, Pham, and Morrissey dissenting.
Mr. Chair, I have a motion. I recommend this, that we adopt the final recirculated program environmental impact report and the general plan amendment.
I second that. McLaughlin.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Wu to adopt the general plan amendment and program EIR. And it is seconded by Commissioner McLaughlin. Do we have any further discussion?
I would like to add a note. I appreciate the other viewpoints of the other commissioners about really listening to the city, the different groups in our cities. But I'm just afraid that the timeline in which we're asking, as well as what more can we ask staff to incorporate. We hear oftentimes tonight that community groups have not been heard, but the duration of this process has been 5 to 6 years, and I
I wouldn't feel comfortable thinking that within 2 months, just with the holidays, with next year, that any much more can be done without us meeting here again in January. And the same discussion will come up that the community has not been heard and that the general plan isn't adequate to be approved. And the timeline needs to be pushed more so that the community can be heard. That doesn't invalidate the fact that, we value input, but at a certain point with any projects, with anything, there needs to be a termination point. And if there's no value in extending the time, then I think it's not wise to push any further unless we see an actual benefit of pushing it longer. And if we do see it, then of course, I think any one of us up here would be in favor of it. But as things lay now, I don't believe there's any additional benefit or any much more we can do even with the additional 2 months.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a comment I'd like to make. I agree with that. I think the general plan it's an amazing document. There's so much effort's gone into it. Its staff addressed the comments brought up by the public in terms of displacement and remediation. And so many of the comments we heard, I think you addressed in your ensuing comments, goes a long way towards creating that open space that everybody desires. It implemented, there's 15 implementation points to address our open space needs. It stresses accessibility, sustainability, all these things that we really think are important and will contribute to the long-term health and welfare and of Santa Ana citizens and help us thrive into the future. So I'm excited about this. So did we?
This is already. I would just say that the community has come here and told us they want more time, but for whatever reason, we're not going to give it. So, and I understand that this has been around for 6 years. I don't think you can say that this has been pushed out for 6 years continuously. I think SB 1000 has made us redouble our efforts. And so perhaps that's the reason why we're doing it. I also think it's undeniable that Santa Ana is open space poor. Residents have told us this as long as I've been on the commission. Our own EJ survey tells us that this is the case. And so I think we've done a disservice by coming in at 2 acres per 1,000 residents. I do think, based on my comments, that it should have been more. And that was the impetus for why I wanted the delay, because I really did want to see that number come up. And I also wanted to make sure that the update includes Willowick as open space. So that's it for my comments.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, make a roll call vote.
I'd like to make a last comment as well. Similar to Commissioner Alderete, I wish that commissioners tonight would have listened to the community. We heard directly from the consultant that a delay until January would not have impeded this process. And I believe that any additional opportunity for community engagement is always a good one. And I just ask commissioners that we think about who we're here to serve. And when we receive public comments, that we consider them before making a vote. Thank you.
Chair and Commissioners, I think it would be helpful for the benefit of the record to clarify the motion being made. It appears that the motion parallels the recommended action from the staff report, but I think it would be helpful for the recording secretary to have for the benefit of the record.
The motion on the table is to approve the final recirculated program environmental impact report number 2020-03 and general plan amendment number 2020-06. Motion was made by Commissioner Wu.
And general plan amendment number 2020-06.
Yes. And seconded by Commissioner McLaughlin.
Correct. Just to add one further point of clarification, it does appear the motion is to recommend that the city council approve the 2 resolutions in question that appear on the screen. I believe that's the content of the motion, but just wanted to point that out.
We're recommending is what you're saying.
Including the findings and statement of overriding considerations and the mitigation monitoring program, I think is what John is alluding to.
Yeah, we're recommending city council adopt the resolution approving those 2 votes.
So can we have that read back?
Recommended city council adopt resolutions approving final recirculated program environmental impact report number 2020-03, including the findings and statement of overriding considerations and mitigation monitoring reporting program, general plan amendment number 2020-06.
Does that satisfy our requirements? Okay. So we're good to go.
Madam Secretary, can you make a roll call vote?
Commissioner Aldereti,
No.
Commissioner Calderon,
Yes.
Commissioner McLaughlin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ramos,
No.
Commissioner Wu,
Yes.
Vice Chair Pham,
Yes.
Chair Morrissey,
Yes.
motion passes with, motion is approved with majority vote, with Commissioners Aldereti and Ramos dissenting.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to-
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry.
Now we'll move on to Commissioner comments.
I'd like to make a comment that we have listened to the community. I've gone out into community meetings, and like Commissioner Brown said and Commissioner Morrissey, we all listened by voting yes. We're only moving the process forward, for which there are mitigation and partnership opportunities in the future to look at specific problems. I know several neighborhood associations that have brought up issues that will be following up with you to continue the environmental justice questions because they have specific problems. So they understood that at the presentation, and they will follow up.
Thank you. Comments from other commissioners? Mr. Calderon?
Sure. Melanie, honestly, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I know it took a lot of time and effort, and you executed really well, and the rest of the city staff, you guys killed it. So good job, guys.
Commissioner McLaughlin?
Yeah, I ditto to that with what Miguel just said. I mean, I think the staff did a lot of work, and there's been a lot of work put in this over the last 6 years. I think we did the due diligence that, last year we did put a pause to the general plan, and there was a reason, because the environmental justice process, part of the environmental justice process was not really understood or defined at that point in time. I think we've spent the last year doing that. Is there going to be other changes? Is there going to be other updates to this? Yes. Is it going to be the last time we touch this and it goes back on the shelf for the other 40-year, general plan? No. This is a living document, and I think we can move it forward and treat it like that, and continue to treat it like that until the next general plan needs to be updated. I think overall, I think staff, under the circumstances, with all the challenges that have existed in the last year, have done a great job pulling this together. I think the way it presents is just outstanding. I think the fact that we blended the environmental justice inside of the elements that we have within the state shows the fabric of what we tried to do and accomplish. I think you guys did a good job doing it. I think now's the time to move on and let's get this to the next level. Thank you for your work on that.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Commissioner Pham, do you have any? Vice Chair Pham?
Yeah, thank you, everyone involved. I think it's a testament to how much you care about the city, the amount of work that's been put in front of us. And I think like everyone else said before, this is just the beginning. I look forward to the implementation of these promises and then these goals. And time will tell whether we achieve these goals, how we implement them. And again, we'll always be here to take a look. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ramos, do you have any final comments?
Yes, I'd like to thank staff for the work that you put into this presentation, for answering questions provided tonight. I would also like to thank the consultants that joined us tonight. Thank you for the transparency and the direct answers. And I would also like to thank members of the public that are still with us now and those that had to leave. Thank you all for providing public comments tonight. I invite you to continue to join us. And I also invite you to raise your concerns and any issues that weren't addressed tonight with the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Alderetti, did you have any final?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to thank staff too for this has been a long haul, so I respect the amount of work that's gone in. I also want to thank all the community members that showed up because I know it's not easy to come here, and it's just past 10 and there's still a number of folks that are still here. So thank them as well.
Thank you. I'd also echo a lot of the comments made, particularly the great work staff did throughout the process. It is a really great document. It presents very well, like Mark said. And I'm really looking forward to the next phase, working on those ordinances and zoning codes. It's going to be fun. So appreciate everybody's patience hanging in there tonight. So do we have any staff comments?
I want to quickly say thank you for the commissioner's guidance and support on this document. We certainly have heard a lot of the issues that have been brought up by our community, and we work very hard to incorporate them so that they're achievable, attainable, and practical and realistic as a community. And I look forward to your recommendation taking this forward to the City Council and have them consider this document as well. But I think most of all for our staff, they really have spent a lot of hours on the document day in and day out. I just can't say enough on not only the team and Fabiola and her team on the work that's been done. So congratulations. We'll take this as City Council. Thank you.
Congrats. And so that will adjourn the meeting until. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Different subject. But just two things I just wanted to throw out. It's kind of a pitch for the neighborhood. Floral Park just recently went in front of the State Historic Commission, and we were approved to move forward as a historic neighborhood for Santa Ana. So the next step is there's a documentation process that goes through between the state and the feds as far as that goes. But we were one of two neighborhoods on the docket this past meeting that allowed us to move forward with being a historic district. And just to say that the other side of it is the advertisement is that this Saturday is going to be a Christmas. We usually have a home tour in the April timeframe. We moved it to Christmas time, so it's on the 13th. So if anybody's interested, feel free to come by. There's going to be 4 houses. They're going to be part of the Christmas spirit, so to speak.
So that includes the Maharaja's house, huh?
That includes the Maharaja's house. It does. Maharaj is a landmark.
You just invited all of Santa Ana.
I did. Yeah, that's okay. But only 100 will show up, I'm sure.
Yeah, part of the Mark's house.
Okay, well, no, it's, I think this is good, and I think it's gonna be helpful to be able to see some other neighborhoods move forward in that same area, so we're happy on it.
Thank you for that. So we'll adjourn to November 22nd at 5:30. Oh, that is the planning commission schedule for that day is canceled. The next meeting is December 13th at 5:30.
And the meeting that was scheduled as a special meeting for tomorrow is also canceled.
That's correct. That would, correct.
We will meet December 13th, but not November 22nd.
And we won't meet tomorrow.
And we won't meet tomorrow.
Is there a cancellation? Is there
There
a
is no
cancellation?
cancellation because it wasn't put on.
Yeah, that's all it's up.